Journalistic ethics for the uncompromising fight, resistant to the constant pulls that yank us left and right. He's a man without a party, a guy without a place, a true rebel outsider, never cave into the state. Objective, honest, ethical, the raw truth torches carried on by the last American vagabond. He can't sign off on genocide, he can't consent to force, won't take the state's abuse, wants government divorce. He parses propaganda, breaks the news without the slant. Globalists are seething, but behold the people's chant. Objective, honest, ethical, the raw truth torches carried on by the last American vagabond. The guy's got unyielding principles, hell can't be mad at that. Hope we see him round these parts again, have another higher side chat. Yeah, he parses propaganda, breaks the news without the slant. Globalists are seething, but behold the people's chant. Objective, honest, ethical, the raw truth torches carried on by the last American vagabond.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, August 21st, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. One thing I have to remember, because I'm trying to remember to do that in the beginning of the shows, usually because there is a little bit of a gap that I end up, getting things going around. For those that don't know, we stream to just about everything you could possibly imagine, even including the ones that we were censored from using pirate channels. Sad that never really got traction, because that would have been pretty cool, but we still do. The point is, as I start the show, I have to sort of organize and set up, not organize, but just get going all the other streams or all the different platforms. And since there's usually a little gap, I figured, we can put that up and play a little bit, and then I'd let it go a little longer so you can hear the song. So hopefully that's not irritating for you. I think you guys would enjoy that. But getting started today, a lot to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot to kind of pack into this. I wanted to start with something a little bit different today. And, it's about ideology and like anarchism, and the conversation of not necessarily like what, my opinions about, I guess anarchism, libertarianism, just voluntarism, or however the different variations, how people pronounce it. But the point being, our choice. And I don't like to put labels on it because of 1,000 reasons where these things tend to kind of couch people in the way they think they're supposed to act. But really just coming down to the idea that we have a right to choose our own path. Like it's, wild, right? And that we don't have some kind of overarching power structure of any kind dictating how you can live that life. And this is not about no rulers, or, it's not about no rules, it's about no rulers. And that's the important part I'm going to make about in the start today. And the reason I'm saying all this is a video that I thought was interesting was going around, and I kind of set it aside to make a point about. And it's not about trying to say this is what you should believe. It's about trying to understand that the idea of coming from the perspective that we should be deciding for ourselves how we live our lives, even if that choice offends somebody else. That goes for both sides of the paradigm. That should be what we agree on. That should be something that we collectively try to at least seek together. And I'm going to get into it now. I wanted to kind of lay out the show today, but it's such an important topic. And I've talked about this so many times in the past about this idea that it's, look, there are people today that yell that they, we're doing this for democracy, and they're not even doing those things for democracy or even in a democracy, but they sure as hell yell it. And so does that then mean that represents anybody who is a democracy? No, especially since those aren't even the point would be that anybody can say they're doing something under the guise of something else or under the banner of something. Doesn't mean that it represents that thing or it even is that thing. But let's just even say you have a diehard anarchist who acts in exactly the way that I think, what would represent that. They could still take action that they believe in that doesn't represent everybody who believes a certain thing. And this should go to any ideology. Just because a socialist does one thing doesn't mean every socialist thinks that, or any number of things, status. They're all in that category for people that understand what the government is. But it's interesting to think about that we're in this time where right now I think people are kind of open to some of these ideas. Difference of thought, what different ways to look at the world. It's not just left and right and vote in 4 years. It's, maybe we should think about a different path. And a lot of them end up kind of cycling through the usual third party, and maybe that is the path, maybe I jumped away from those things too quickly. The point is, I think a lot of us have worked over this path a long time, and I'm somewhat new to this side of it. And I think it's important to kind of go after this again for people to think about the other possibilities out there. What, as I always point out, anarchism, whether you think this is, which doesn't just mean chaos, I'll go through it today, is the only ideology out there, self-governance, which is not government, but it is governance, that exists without a place for leaders or for government, rather. That it's not rulers. This idea is so interesting that why would people in power structures who want to control your lives so desperately try to stop a thing that doesn't have a place for them to exist? Baffles the mind, doesn't it? But yeah, I think it's an important thing to think about, whether it's that direction or others, just to see that I feel like we're trapped in this basic kind of idea. Like if you look at the left and right paradigm, you can look at it in the same way of like socialism, fascism, and like the same kind of arcing dynamic. And there's different variations, but almost history has seemed to kind of react that way. And again, it's overly simplified, clearly, but that I think we need to start thinking away from that. What is the common thread on all of these problems? Government. And again, it may be hard for people to think about what a world would look like without some kind of overarching structure. But this is why I think it's worth considering. Not that I'm going to sell you on it today. I'm only going to talk about this to start, and this video that I think is relevant to kind of spark the conversation, because it's just so much of a thing out there. I've done deep talks and studies on it for, over the last decade. But I'm hoping people today will take the time to look into these alternative ideas and realize that, we all exist in a world that is the way it is, whether or not government exists. It is simply a structure that's placed over the top of it that basically claims the right of authority over all that we're doing. Without the idea of government, we all still exist. The people that build the roads, the people that want to run, any number of things you could think of outside of being a government representative are all still there. All the specialties, all the expertise. And this is why it's important to think about how all of those people, and then maybe just simplify it to a smaller location, this county, this town, whatever, could get together and say, can't we do this without this thing? Maybe not. Maybe not. I think so. And I think a lot of intelligent, educated, very politically invested people in my entire life have laid that out so clearly, myself included. I digress. Obviously, you can tell that I think this is an important topic and something that I'm passionate about. But other things we're going to talk about today, as I jokingly said when I started, I got right into it. There's plenty of things, but ultimately the quick breakdown. I'm going to start with that point today that I do think is very relevant for a lot of reasons. We're going to talk about some different points around, I guess, tariffs and the meat conversation that really are kind of a springboard for larger points, but it's something going around that's worth pointing to. And the two-party illusion stuff from that, and the idea, again, kind of dovetailing back into the point I'm going to start with about the new political movements and how I don't see this being any different, even with good intentions, if it's still pushed into the same system. And I'll actually start with a great interview I had with Sam and make some points from that. But I also want to talk about some points about Gavi, which is not even new. I'm actually completely surprised that I didn't see this happen at the end of July. And I think it's because there's so much going on. And we're so, just that ultimately Donald Trump double crossing everybody to fund again Gavi, just like the last time. In fact, it's a little different. We'll go over it. Is happening again. I mean, it's not like it should be surprising, or other examples of mRNA connections, points about what Elon Musk just put out. I want to reiterate something about masks, since I do see that conversation bubbling back up. And clearly that was a hill that we died on. I shouldn't say died on, but we're willing to die on, and we're right about it. And we're still, it's important to think about how clear that was all the way back then. David Moren's connection to the COVID-19 conversation, which I think is another head fake, guys. It's a potent conversation. I mean, I hope he still gets held accountable, but it's going to be a slap on the wrist, as we're already seeing come forward. And these people should be in prison for the rest of their lives, guys. And so documentation, slap on the wrist is not what anybody should be fighting for. We'll talk about the FBI, false flag, manufactured plot, old school news for this platform. How many times we've talked about this. I'm just laughing about how dumb this is today. With the image you can see on the main image for today. I mean, it's not a joke. This lady literally went into a Home Depot in a burqa after pledging to ISIS. And then, and the FBI gave her the thing she needed, the money to buy it, the car to go to the store. I mean, it's insane. And we'll get into how they exploit people with low intelligence and exploit people who are mentally handicapped. And that's not to say that's who this person is, but that's what they aim for, is people who are emotionally manipulatable, people that they can coerce and then go, well, they wouldn't have done it if we didn't give them the material, the money, the time, we'll go into it. And it's just incredible. And that's not to say that this person might not have been willing to do something like this. That's a separate conversation. This is where you get into the idea of pre-crime, and it matters, guys. We'll talk about, of course, the idea of, as in the title pointed out, the censorship from the military, which is not new, but it's coming up in the context of Stars and Stripes, and some conversations after that I'll hold off in case time is an issue today. But I do want to either today or tomorrow get into Derek's amazing article about Underil, which is not new to those that watch this platform or any of us. It's just important to see where it is going and how they've now tripled the amount that they're going to be working with, and some updates on Iran. Unfortunately, guys, right when I was getting ready to get started, I found out my father went back to the ER. Now, again, personal note, for those of you who've been following along, I'm not going to get into it all again today, but the sad reality is that it doesn't appear to be getting better. And we've luckily found somebody who, in the mainstream side of it, who does seem, at least able to acknowledge that it seems pretty clearly to be an autoimmune issue that they're now beginning to actually identify, even though they're pushing for more surgery, and we've already had surgeries, and all it really ultimately would have taken, if this pans out to be what we think it is, that's what it's pointing at, is steroids. It's incredible, the system that we're in, and how people, even with good intentions, are forcing people in pathways that are killing them. I mean, I can't imagine what would have happened during COVID. Now, I'm not even saying I know for a fact that's what my father's situation is. It's what I believe is you're going to know first the moment we find something out more definitive. But sadly enough, he's now dealing with the problem coming back up again, and had to go in today because he's worried something is getting worse. And so ultimately now our aggressive focal point is to try to find a specialist, somebody local. If you know anybody, reach out. Don't expect me to respond. I'm getting a lot of reach out, but about somebody in California, which is where he is, and somebody who is, sort of a GI immune vaccine injury specialist, somebody who's aware of the mainstream practices and open-minded enough to consider the alternative, a smart person, and let them consider what this information looks like. My brother, of course, is putting this through AI and all kinds of different things. And the information is just like unequivocally, like very clearly one of these different possibilities, none of which these people have even checked the boxes off the list. Anyway, I told you I wasn't going to get into it today, but bear that in mind, just in general, that, time-wise and so on. But let's get started today. I think an important thing to start with, really had a fantastic conversation with Sam Husseini. I believe this is the fourth time we've had him on the show. We talked about his vote pact idea from before, and the idea of sort of like using the third party on either side of it to sort of make an agreement that we're not going to vote for anybody in the left-right paradigm. We're going to only vote for a third party, but if we both do it together, it kind of boxes out the idea of, oh, you're just taking a vote away from the main, that whole argument. It's an interesting idea. Now, I want to preface, or you already know, I shouldn't need to reiterate my opinions, because my principled stances on these things have been the same. Save for some variations as I've become more aware of things, the same for a decade, guys, longer than that. So what's interesting, I guess I'm only kind of saying this because certain people read the title and were like, Brian, really? Now you're believing in the system? And it's like, let's, come on. The title does not, anyway, the whole show you should watch before you jump to conclusions about what my opinions might have radically changed about. The point is, no, I do not think that's possible, which Sam knows. And I talked to him about this. That's just why I respect him so much. And we don't agree on everything. I just believe he's a good person. I believe he does things for the right reasons as I see it. That doesn't mean that he might not take a wrong path or decide to double cross us all. I don't believe that, but we'll see. And I love how it ends too, because Sam literally says to me, hold me accountable. because it's exactly what I expect from people who want to be held accountable, people who actually mean what they say. And I'm hoping that is what Massey and somebody like that turns out to be. I have doubts, obviously. But the point, as I've always said, is that somebody like a Massey or Sam, they mean what they say. They would be demanding, like Sam does, that we hold his feet to the fire because he means what he says and he wants to do it. That would be the point if that's the case, like with a Massey. So we had this great conversation about a couple things. One was, in case you hadn't seen it, in fact, let me grab it real quick since we're briefly pointing to it. I believe I still have it pulled up, where basically Sam, yeah, here it is right here. Oh, this is actually perfect. I'll just play this. Oh, here's the actually longer one right here. I'll let it speak for itself. It's enjoyable to watch.
Trump sold his false promise to the American people that he would drain the swamp. The presidency is supposed to be a public trust. Trump has turned it into the single most profitable.
Senator, you talk about corruption. How can you talk about corruption when you back genocide? What could be more corrupt than backing genocide? This is part of the same con with you and Trump playing off of each other. Oh, he's worse. Oh, he's worse. You were put on notice in November of 2023 by the Center for Constitutional Rights and other legal and human rights organizations. Notice on potential legal liability for aiding, abetting, inciting, or conspiring to commit genocide through congressional acts and demands. You were put on notice, and you backed it, and you backed the genocide to the hilt for years on end. How dare you talk about corruption? Right. How dare you talk about corruption?
Thank you for your diatribe.
Oh,
now,
you get to make a speech every day. You get to make a hypocritical speech every day, and God forbid you should be questioned about your diabolical record. It's amazing that you can show your genocidal face in public, Mr. Senator. Mr. Senator. Shame on Public Citizen for not allowing questions to this genocidal maniac. Shame, yeah. Corruption. What could be more corrupt than not allowing questions?
Right. The whole point is, when he got there, he found out they weren't allowed to ask questions. Great event for journalists to show up. You know, the point is they invited journalists and then said, you can't ask questions. Just be here to basically regurgitate what I say about how bad Trump is, combating corruption. How insulting, you know? And this is exactly why he got upset. He's passionate. He believes in this, you know, and it's just so it's incredible, at least as I understand, you know. Again, I'm not going to tell you to believe what I think about anybody's opinions, but that's what my impression is of what he believes. And so the point is that he did this, and I was like, that's nice to see somebody getting called their face, and that he says it about both sides. That's refreshing. So I invited him on to talk about it. And ultimately, in the process of that, setting that up, he announced that he was running for Congress in Maryland. And so we touched on that as well. And so what's interesting is, you know, my opinions about this, and Sam does, as I said, and we talked about it. And I even told him, I said, you know, don't expect me to vote for anybody because I don't believe it's translated the outcome. But I still do believe two things, or many things, but in this context, the one, if anybody, including somebody like you out there who believes you can make a difference doing what he's doing, then try. I would never, it's the same thing I think about voting. If you believe that it might make a difference, go for it. Just don't think that it's the only thing you should be doing. And so we talk about it in that context, as well as the fact that I believe that doing it from like Derek Burrows running for mayor simply to be able to expose the corruption, or if he happens to win, to bring it all down, or John McAfee, I interviewed him when he was running in, I think, 2020, before he, you know, a while before he passed away or got killed or whatever happened ultimately. And he was doing the same thing. I'm only running to be able to bring the whole system down. Adam Kokesh, same thing when I interviewed him about that. He said he was running to be able to bring the system down. So the point is he's saying he's running to bring awareness to this from an activism perspective. And, you know, obviously if he wins, and we talked about what he will try to do. And he talks about data centers and Israel influence. We talked about Section 219, you know, and it's exactly what I want to hear. But that's why I will be more aggressively accountable for somebody like that, because I'm hoping that they're actually mean what they say. You know, I mean, my gut opinion is that the system will never allow somebody like that to be in position, but I'll support his run for it for sure. But like I said, I don't believe the system actually translates. So I'm not going to be doing that, because I believe that is the illusion itself, is thinking that you can go there and vote. But as I've always pointed out, if there is a place where that would be, it would be the more local you get. So you can take that into consideration. And I really want to stress that. I don't want to, you know, drive people to think they shouldn't try that. If you disagree with me in the slightest, take that action. But as I was talking about somebody online, in my experience, the no voting crowd are some of the most politically active people that I've ever met in my life. Like Derek, people that are avidly like vote James Corbett, vote no one 2012, since as long as I've been doing this, and 2020, 2012. The point is that these people are recognize that the voting process has been bastardized, and in an actual statist representative society, if that's what you want, then voting would be paramount. But that it's been taken from us, been manipulated. And so if you want to do it, go for it. But the point is, there are a million more politically active things you can do than checking that box every 2 to 4 years. Okay, that's important, I think. And this is why I segued this with the point of the anarchism conversation. But please check it out, because I do think it's a great interview. We talk about a lot of different points, his opinions on Iran and a lot of different things. And so what I want to translate or to transition this into is the conversation of the anarchism video that was going around. Now, this is what I first saw. Now, I want to point out, by the way, okay, come on. I'm hoping I'm not having problems here. Okay, give me a second, guys. So it won't let me bring up the screen share all of a sudden. This is what I've been dealing with, guys. It says, before presenting a screen, remove other media from the screen. There's nothing up there. Just before I got started, I was doing the same thing, and it wasn't letting me put a video up because it said that the video had been deleted. I have no idea what's going on, guys. So I don't know how to go past this all of a sudden. So let me see if I can open another window like I was doing before that didn't have to do last time, and see if I can bring up something else. Damn it, this might derail the entire show. I'm going to take a screenshot just so I can show you guys what it was saying. So the videos can come up. Oh, let me delete the screen. Let me remove the question. Let me remove the screen share. Do it again. I shouldn't have to watch. I should just be playing a video so you guys have to walk. But I want you to know what's happening. I don't want you to think that I'm just that's part of what I worry about is people that are new who are like, man, this guy's all over the place, even though I can't be anyway. Okay. Screen share. Okay. Let's try this and see if it works. Let's work. Come on. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Here, actually, I'll show you real quick since I'm not necessarily, well, I mean, I might end up being in a rush, but let's just do this real quick so you can see this. And again, I'm never, like I say every time, guys, I don't know what this stuff is. For all I know, this is just StreamYard having problems. But it's weird how often this happens to us. And that's what I always want to point out to people is that I'm not, I don't know what's causing this, but it's just a weird concentration for our platform all the time. And again, it's like it could be any number of things, but it's just before presenting a screen, remove other media. And I had to delete the screen share to bring it back up. Probably just a glitch. Who knows? Still find that strange. Happens to us all the time. Okay, continuing. So now watch it won't come back up. Okay, here we go. So this is a video that I saw going around. This is the post I saw. Now, long story short, this person blocked me because of what I said, and that wasn't why I brought it up, but I'll include that because I just think it's perfectly sort of an end cap on this whole thing. And so I don't want to refresh this because I don't want to, well, I think I have it over here just in case. Yeah, here's the main one. So this is the post. Of course, her name is She Thinks Freely. I'll let that carry over as you can laugh at that when we're done. PSA to the libertarians, anarchists, and all other, listen to this, anti-American subversives. I guess subversives, or maybe that is how you pronounce that. They're right. It's subversive. That's not how you spell subversives, is it? Anyway, I don't care. Subversives was the point. So basically saying libertarians, which by the way, the Trump administration like aggressively tried to tap into. False. Pretending to be with Massey and Ron Paul. But think about how insane it is. But just so you know for the podcast too, her image is women for Trump. Diehard fake MAGA, which is what I would call it. Not the ones that actually wanted what Trump promised, but still pretend he gave them the things he never did. That's this person, as far as I could tell from looking at their content. But that, libertarians are anti-American? I mean, how do you even make sense of that? And I want to be clear, this is not some weirdo one. This is not only did it get a pretty good reach for the 11,000 followers, but this is a sentiment that I see throughout the fake MAGA, not the real ones who probably largely like the idea of libertarianism and, voluntarism because that's what they tried to emulate and now don't like Trump because they didn't get what they were promised, like a, whatever you think of whether he is libertarian, like a Dave Smith type who wears that label and pointed out Trump was lying because he was. So continuing, by the way, in my mind, so and we'll get into it at the end of the segment here, is that anarchism and libertarianism are in the same category. Anarchism is not chaos. It does not mean you're just a maniac lighting things on fire, guys. That is what the power this is why I ultimately think we're getting content like this, that people like this from this kind of fake political team sport MAGA side or team sport, politics, is to conflate the idea of anything that gives you the idea, of freedom with less government with the idea of terrorism. This is not even new, but this is getting way more alarming today because of how much, look at what we've seen. Does anybody actually not notice the difference of what we lived through? Like, I don't want to compare Biden to Trump because people are so quick to see the partisan lens, but just go back to, any administration. But it's true. Over the last 8 years, look at where we are compared to either one of those. Even Trump's last administration, it's absolutely insane where we are. So to think more freedom, less government, you're now an anti-American terrorist. And that happens. That's Trump's domestic terrorism post, executive order, just like Biden's. She says, we the people, of course, don't you love how they love to pretend to represent everybody in this country, AKA MAGA, which again is in her mind are the people that still back Trump no matter what he does wrong. We'll never unite with you, she screams. Okay, so I want to read that first part. We'll read through what she says next. Let's play this clip and you'll see what they're referencing. Oh, shoot. Oh, good. I still have it. Okay. Because she has me blocked, so I don't want to lose the post somehow. You can see it right there. Okay, so here's the post. So what you're going to hear is now, and again, I want to be clear. It's not about the people necessarily, whether they really believe what they're saying or they have ulterior motives, because I'm sure people do. But these aren't, these are, Mises Institute, that, as it says, Doug French, president emeritus of the Mises Institute, explicitly says anarchy is the solution or anarchy is the point. So what she's trying to do is frame this as they want chaos. They're telling you they want to burn it all down. They want the country to collapse. But anybody with a brain, or rather I shouldn't say it like that because plenty of people don't know any better or misled, but people who care about the truth and have looked into it understand that's not what anarchy means. So I think there's an entire point here of trying to sabotage what is a growing movement of some sort of lesser government direction. What we're always told we're supposed to be doing in this country, especially from Republicans, but not. The opposite of what's always happening. So let's watch the clip and you'll see what they mean. And what basically it comes down to is somebody in the chat, in the conversation or in the crowd asking about why, that thinking anarchism is bad. And they're going, that's the point, guys. We want, I'll let it speak for itself and then we'll talk about it.
Said after the Roman Empire collapsed that anarchy broke out. Isn't that what you said? Isn't that what we're after?
Now, that first statement alone, I think, is important. And this is why I want to say, who knows what their real intentions are? Maybe they really do pretend that it means chaos and that's what they're driving. And if you make that connection to the post-war dynamic, what they're really talking about, I argue, is the fear-mongering, which is largely, if you look it up, sort of a classic, one of the earlier examples of some sort of a coordinated conspiracy lie, really. That they wanted to hype. It's sort of like the socialist scare thing today. Do they exist? Yes. Even the ways they frame them? Yes. But is it this big scourge like the Red Scare kind of a thing? It is manipulated. And back in many times throughout history, there's a famous time around 1890-ish where ultimately there was this big scaremongering push about the international anarchistic, and what they were doing is making it about terrorism. People that were burning things down. Now, like I said earlier, are there people that believe in, that they're acting in the reality of anarchism and they want to go burn government buildings down and so on? Yes. You could even make a fair argument for why that would exist within that idea. The point, nonetheless, is it's not specific to everybody who believes those things. Somebody who believes in democracy, who starts some court, like an actual democracy over here, and somebody does one over there, might do different things because it's how they see it. And the bottom line is what most people that I understand who are trying to fight for some kind of anarchistic change in the direction, at least, of that are fighting for not some chaotic society, but the exact opposite. Because we live in a chaotic society. We live in a broken, burning down dumpster fire of a government-created broken society. What we want, at the very least, is to give it a shot in the direction of something where we don't have the centralized, institutional, hierarchical government structures. I think it's very possible, and I think we know it's possible, in fact, throughout history, but it's never been given a chance because of the very things. And that's one of the points that they point out. They say, well, see, there's never an example where it's ever succeeded. Well, there's also never an example where you don't see the power structures in existence putting their thumb on it to try to stop it from being a threat. That's just how this always works, in my opinion.
For anarchy to break out? Well, anarchy might break out again, and that would be a bad thing. Okay. So you are on record as opposed to the rest of this crowd, that anarchy breaking out would be a bad thing.
That's right. No, as I said, look, you have to also see what.
Now this guy's laughing, so it's kind of hard to hear him. I think he's got an accent too, but let's you know that for the podcast.
What the American army looks like in the meantime. It's like the American army. They let the Ukrainians do the fighting for a reason. Because the American army is just a laughing stock. Stephen Kinsella has brought libertarianism ahead quite a bit. If you read my preface to his big book, I hail him as being the most important legal theorist of his generation. Stephen, can you say something about this?
I have thought about this before, about what fields need to be developed. Most of the ones I have in mind are fairly esoteric.
Also, and that's why they cut it. That's also something that is, bad. How dare we think esoteric? At the end of the day, guys. And by the way, as somebody pointed in the chat, that it apparently is how you spell subversive. It just looked odd to me for some reason. But so it's an interesting thing here, right? First of all, that what they're saying is that anarchy it's perceived as chaos and negative, but ultimately that the people that are looking for more of a less government libertarian anarchistic direction, that's not how it's seen by them. And ultimately what we would drive toward would be less hierarchical structures and less top-down government control, if government at all, which is how I would look at it. But it's an interesting thing for them to push back on, right? And the idea that, and as he points out, like the military, and this is relevant to her comment. Are we not seeing the same things in the world? I mean, you point out, Venezuela is not a military victory. They succeeded in what they were trying to accomplish, but that was an intelligence success, right? At the end of the day, to act like that's a war won, it's kind of embarrassing. If you look at the reality of everything else we've seen going back a very long time, when's the last time they had a real military success? Even the ones they've occupied. Can you call Iraq a success? Can you call, even Syria was ultimately now taken by Israel, essentially. Same thing's happening in Venezuela, by the way. But he's not wrong to point out with what's going on in Iran, what the world can see, that there's a lot of hype going on. Americans are coming to, kind of having a come to Jesus meeting about this and going like, well, I guess we aren't as powerful and almighty, even militarily, as we've been told. And I had this conversation a long time ago, for example, about aircraft carriers. You want to understand how we have what? I haven't looked in a long time. Last I checked, it was like 13 compared to their 4, like at the next closest country of like Russia or whatever. And again, that might have changed a lot the last time I looked. The point was at the time, that's already we're going beyond that with drones and where this is going. And they stated that at the time, but yet they kept dumping money into it. Why? Because we have this broken system where we live on the blood of other nations and the merchants of death and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. They just had to keep the cycle going. Well, now that's shifting to Palantir and OpenAI and all the rest. The point, though, was that it needed that, even though we didn't. And instead of investing in now you have Rubio wringing his, clutching his pearls and wringing his hands about, drones in Iran. Well, you could have made that pivot a long time ago, but you guys were stuck in the same old cycle. But I digress. The point here is that, the military is clearly either been driven into the ground for other reasons or is just not what we were told because we've been sold out underneath us by the very people that were supposed to be supporting us. Same things happen. Look at Israel's military. It's the same conversation. It's all about hype. Now, what the post or the actual statement was from the first part, PSA to libertarians and anarchists all over you're anti-American subversives. MAGA will never unite with you, except for the fact that I think the actual majority of conservatives that saw themselves as MAGA are very much on that side of the conversation right now. That's why I don't trust people like this and wonder where they're coming from. Because if you look at if you're in this community, you know this right now, guys. It's obvious. It was obvious to me in January going forward, back when nobody was talking about it. And she says, what you're advocating for is not limited government. In fact, it quite literally is. I don't know why, they're just trying to make it different because they pretend they want limited government. So when they say that's not it, they're trying to put space between them. But clearly, you can live in a libertarian society where there's limited government. Anarchism wouldn't have government, as far as I would my understanding of it. So it's a dumb thing to say. But she says, Doug French, President Emeritus of Mises Institute, explicitly says anarchy is the point. Right. No rulers. Not no rules, no rulers. Discussing the collapse of Rome and anarchy breaking out, French says that's what we're after. In fact, here, let's just go real quickly to this. So this is even what just Brave, just asking, the search engine, what they argue it is. Now, I found this actually quite revealing. In my experience, going back a lot, pretty much until now, you ask anything, you don't get the real definition. You get chaos, even from these things, right? Unless you're going to the dictionary, which would even secondarily, or maybe even first with a secondary, would have the actual definition. But this is what they gave me. Anarchy is not a form of governance in the traditional sense. Now, I disagree. Governance is a different word than government, because the whole point of anarchy is it's self-governance. That's the whole thing, right? So it's important. It's just not government. In the traditional sense, it says it is defined by the absence of central governing authority. State, rulers, while it's often classified as political theory, philosophy explicitly rejects hierarchical structures and coercive government institutions. Isn't that literally what everybody in this country is screaming about right now? Yeah, maybe we should consider that this is something that's viable. Instead of governing through a state, anarchy advocates for self-governance and voluntary cooperation. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be somebody that will take advantage. Weird, just like happens all over the place today. And in fact, the government does it too. So in this case, you would just kind of box out the idea that government takes advantage of its own power against you. You'll still have the dishonest people to try to steal. And it's either, and again, I don't want to get pulled in because I've had hour-long conversations about outlining exactly how this works. If you want to look into it, you should. The point is that there are very clear ways that this ultimately works out. But it also could fail, just like tons of other experiments in governance and society, like other failed democracies or whatever else. It's weird that we make this one unique in the sense of it will fail, or that you'll get bad things that happen as a result. Well, look at what we're living through, guys. Maybe we should give it a shot. Maybe it's like I'm kind of half being facetious when I say that. I do believe that. But with that logic, it's like, why don't we try the one thing that we haven't given a shot yet as we're literally living through another failure? But not every American sees it that way. In this system, social organization is achieved through decentralized decision-making, conscious-based processes, mutual aid and community-based problem-solving, horizontal networks of autonomous groups rather than top-down command. And again, it's up for you to decide. Maybe you want none of that, and you start your own community. This is the idea of how this works. Now, overlapping that with the illusion, which I'm not going to get into as well today, but because I've talked about it, the network state agenda. That is a group in the government arena that we're talking about, the technocratic side of it, who are trying to take advantage of that idea. Because if you truly look into these things, Prospera, any of them, Praxia, the seasteading, it's all ties back to the same inner circle of people right in Trump's inner circle. And clearly they do not believe the core point. It's a CEO-run country, so it's not about self-governance. So you have to understand, they're using people. That's what Trump used when he said libertarians, except now she wants you to believe they're all terrorists. Now, I like this one. Now, this is an Emma Goldman quote. Same kind of point. People always go, well, do you know what Emma Goldman was a part of? Why is that, first of all, relevant? Second, it's just a statement, and that could mean things whether or not she said it. Secondarily, just because, again, she is an anarchist and has, she's kind of the founding element of this idea, doesn't mean that's what everybody else has to believe, or rather, in the sense, do. If she's out there, did bad things in her life, that doesn't mean every anarchist will do them. It's weird that we ever have to go through those simple things, but so many people fall for these logic traps. Anarchism stands for the liberation of the human mind from the dominion of religion and liberation of the human body from the coercion of property. Liberation from the shackles and restraint of government. It stands for a social order based on the free grouping of individuals. Now, is that going to have problems? Yep, just like we have here. But doesn't that sound like something that is possible? I argue yes. And I'd like to believe in most Americans, if you were really laid this out in a clear way, would go, yeah, man, that sounds like what they promised us, and it's clearly. But even the point of religion, for example, some people push back. It's not about saying you don't get religion. It's about the idea that you're freed from the dominion of these structures, right? The mainstream Catholicism that doesn't actually half the time believe the things they put out. Look at all these different pedophile priests, right? But it doesn't mean all of them. But simply understanding that you're freed from these dominion of these hierarchical structures. That's the main point. To me, screams obvious. Continuing, it says, when somebody argues anarchy would leave people defenseless, even though, like we just went through, that's the literal opposite. All the people still, even the ones that were in government just before we stopped it, are still there. They still exist. The military still exists. Now, whether or not you want it to be an organized group or not is up for the community. The point we see, and it's just complicated. People always go, oh, I'll just vote then. That seems stupid to me. Let's avoid the difficult and go for the easy. But the point being is that clearly there are still people that can defend themselves. There's still people with guns and still people that, can gather and collect and defend the community. But it says French makes the collective position even clearer. He says, you're on the record, as you heard, opposing that the rest of this crowd, that anarchy be a bad thing? Yes. The person saying they think that. In other words, thinking anarchy is bad, she says, puts you in the opposite of the rest of the libertarian crowd. Not necessarily. That's a really stupid all or nothing perspective. He's simply saying that in this room, we agree that anarchy is something because he understands, I argue, what the real meaning is. But that still doesn't mean that everybody in another room over there feels the same. But this is how people in this false binary political team sport politics, it's just they're very limited in the way they see things. It's all or nothing, left or right. And they've been trained that way. Or it's all dishonest trying to make you ignore this. I don't know. In other words, thinking anarchy is bad puts you in the opposite of the rest of the libertarian crowd. Herman Hope, leading libertarian anarcho-capitalist philosopher at the Mises Institute, founder of the Property and Freedom Society called the American Army a laughingstock. Well, look around, ladies and gentlemen. Stephen Kinsella, libertarian theorist. Oh, and then here, the idea that would then mean something other than he's just acknowledging what he can see is your opinion. Maybe he's derisive. Maybe he hates it. Maybe he wants to see it fall down. Or maybe he just acknowledges that we can all see that. And that's relevant to the fact that we're not living under this control structure that they frame, or that we don't have to anyway. Now it says, they say they need to develop fair and esoteric, the areas that he wants to develop are fairly esoteric, And he says, and Hope tells the audience the general IQ is going down, while the few people who still have high IQ have a greater responsibility to preserve and spread these ideas. Now here's an interesting difference. Who knows if they mean these things either? That's always just like who knows if the technocratic maniacs believe what they say. Question it. But what's interesting is general IQ is going down defined. I mean, guys, it's verifiable. You look at the studies, look at the, so it's, I guess this is an example of one of them. But ultimately, the few people who have high IQ have a responsibility to control, to run the government? No, to spread ideas. I find that to be a very important difference on the way these people talk about things. Now, again, like I said, maybe they're lying or whatever. But if you're talking about people who have, the power, the wherewithal, the resources to spread ideas, that's never a bad thing, in my opinion. If we understand that you have a right to go, I don't want to hear it, I'm going to go over here. It's ideas, it's free speech, it's freedom of ideology. The fact that we've even gotten to a place in this country where we pretend like that's somehow no longer allowed, or in this box or with this word, you're just being played, guys. Even if you think those things are bad, you either are of the mind that you have a right to think those things or not, whatever those things may be. And if you argue that you don't have a right to think or say those things, then you are lost if you still believe in what you pretend you do when it comes to the Constitution, founding ideas of this country. So having a greater responsibility to preserve and spread ideas is absolutely what I would agree with when it comes to people who believe they see something that others don't, right? Whether it doesn't mean you're smart or not, or smarter or not. Some people see things that others don't. Very important. They truly believe they're smarter than the masses. Now, is that what they said? You can listen to it. You can argue, and I'm sure they do think they're very smart. But here's the thing, though, guys. It's the same kind of point, right? Do you not think that Trump and his team think they're smarter than everybody else? Obviously they do. And if you asked her, she'd probably go because they are, and it's just it's that one-sided view of the world where anybody against Trump is now a monster terrorist who wants to bring on the country. And it's alarming because these people are real. Whether this is real or not, they do exist. Anarchy is the objective. Again, yes, which means not rulers, not chaos, which is the only thing they can see. And a military is a laughingstock, obviously real. And they are the enlightened high IQ class entrusting with preserving esoteric knowledge. What? Think about that ridiculous framing after what they just said. I have some ideas that are fairly esoteric becomes we're entrusted with the esoteric knowledge. Like, my God. I mean, it shows you a lack of understanding, quite frankly. But this exact framing is identical to what the technocratic, elitist, theocratic direction, that's what they believe. They think they are prophets of the new society. Read their books. Clearly they haven't. Notice any through line amongst these prominent political media voices tied to broader Mises, Rothbard, Hope ecosystem and list off all these people. You want to tell me Ron Paul wants to see things burn down? You want to tell me any of these people are out there going, burn it all down? They're not. I mean, Tom Woods, I don't think any of them are. I would just say that that's probably the person I'm least familiar with. but I am familiar. But the point is, all of them, in my experience, are out there avidly fighting for limited government. Exactly. For less government intrusion into our lives. At least, some of them you could argue ostensibly, but either way, it's true. Which podcast do they frequent? Who is platforming them? Oh, good. So now we're getting into where they shouldn't be platformed anymore. Talk about freedom again. Now, again, that's just my opinion, not what it actually says. I'm objective enough to point that out. They're very open about where they want to take things, the youth. So, this is, again, if you're talking about a battleground of changing ideas, the youth is always the focal point. But let me ask you something. If you're talking about educating the youth on understanding these ideas versus indoctrinating them to think that only one way is the future, which one sounds alarming to you? Pretty simple. The Macy's Institute says TikTok and Instagram are the most important arenas. Well, sounds, just like everybody out there trying to propagandize people. And I don't necessarily agree with the idea of like these campaigns to influence ideas, but people out the society, the way things work today, this is how people just think things operate. There's plenty to criticize. I want to drive the opposite direction of this weird social media, digital direction that we're going in. Nonetheless, if you're in their position and you think you need to fight for these ideas, that's probably what you would do. Criticize it like you should anybody. The Ron Paul Scholars Program recruits college students for foreign policy and civil college students. This is a weird thing you're trying to make into something dark. So when this network targets young Americans through war, Israel, foreign policy, distrust of the government, endless grievance against the establishment, yeah, like 90% of Americans, by the way, understand the ideology behind the sales pitch. What? What is exactly the ideology you're selling here? Some kind of dark dystopian end? They're literally saying you should be free and not have to deal with government, and you're fighting them. Think about that for a second. Here's the part they somehow don't understand. Let her wax intellectual here for a minute. You represent roughly 1% of the electorate for a reason. See, this is where it gets really embarrassing. How in the world do we think we know any of this stuff? So the very structures that are lying to us are the ones that are going to accurately break down for us what the representation is of a group they don't want us to know exists. Yeah, good luck with that. Guys, we can't take polls at face value. We can't take Clinton's going to win 99%. Yeah, but let's pretend like we know that there's only 1% of people that exist within multiple categories: libertarianism, anarchism, voluntarism. That's just stupid. In fact, I'm arguing that it's a majority of the population has some overlap with these groups today, especially, just ideology today, especially because of what's changing. You have never built a governing majority. Well, that's what I said earlier, because these things are, you can't even barely get a conversation about any third party. You know how long those have been around? Green, whatever else. They've all been co-opted and manipulated. That's not the point, though, is that they make sure that these things never see the light of day. The system is built on making the status quo or maintaining. So that doesn't make a fair point to me. And historically speaking, there are plenty of examples where these things are clearly represented in society. They just don't like to highlight it. And it says you are not going to co-opt MAGA and turn it into an anarchist project built on, get this, hatred, grievance, and contempt. That's what she thinks this is. So give Ron Paul, Scott Horton, Thomas Massey, Andrew Napolitano, Daniel McAdams. Yeah, they're all about hatred, grievance, and contempt. Really? So this is what I really stress on this, guys. Not only is it the attack on one of the most obvious directions that we should be taking, not chaos and fighting and burning things down, but simply self-governance, less government control, if not zero. And they want you to think it's hatred, grievance, and contempt. What are you guys doing? You're literally attacking, hating people that have different ideas. You're literally, everything you're outlining, you're basically pointing at yourself. The people on that stage were doing the opposite, in my opinion. But think about for a second somebody who has in her picture, woman for Trump. She thinks freely. And what she's doing is attacking somebody for simply believing in a different ideology. Go ahead and walk me through, lady, how that's American. MAGA's not your vehicle. America's not your experiment. Well, it's just, anyway, you get the point, guys. What's crazy is if she's a real person, she's pointing at people that are fighting for her, while the very thing she's a part of is exactly what she's outlining. Not the sense of fighting for well, maybe even that, by the way. When we understand what they're doing in this country, which we'll get into financially in a second, what Israel's doing in this country, maybe not anarchy, but chaos maybe really is their objective. But here she is advocating for why we should be attacking anybody that fights for her freedom. And of course, like I said, blocked me, and I'll include the things so you can read it in case you didn't see that. But think about how lame that is too, to be, somebody challenges your idea. I didn't even underneath her post. I just simply pointed out there and said, somebody want to tell her the real definition of anarchy, and blocked me and wrote this. Bro, get the F out of here with that stupid SHIT. Anarchy is anti-American. You traitorous piece of excrement. Well done. So having a different perspective on ideology, otherwise known as freedom of ideology, is anti-American. Maybe you should brush up on what's actually American. But you see, this is the biggest problem, is that people like this believe they're fighting for something they don't even understand. That's like people advocating for, censoring people on anti-Semitism or deporting people who have a legal right to be here and acting like you understand the Constitution. It's just sad. The bigger point here, guys, is that this is important in a sense of how we can change what we're living through. Now, off that note, what you're getting of a lot of these people, whether that's one of them or not, is a lot of fake, ridiculous, divisive content. Now, again, I don't know whether that's what that was. Maybe she believes those things, but I think it's important to see that there's an entire element of this. And right now it's very much focused on one side. And I think actually take a step back and think about what that shows you. Do you notice that you don't see like a massive coordinated like Democrat campaign? They're out there, but not the visible way that we're seeing all of these huge Republican commentators on Twitter and elsewhere. Why? In my opinion, because it's all one thing. And right now, what they want you looking at is the Republican momentum or lack thereof. And then during COVID-19, what did we see? The exact opposite. You have all the Republicans going, you're bad and you're doing bad things and we're the freedom ones. Now it's exactly the way around. You got all the Democrats going, you're terrible and you're destroying the country and none of them even care. All the people that voted for the big, beautiful bill are out there going, 40 trillion, the debt. How dare we let this happen? You did it. So my point is, guys, that there's a lot of fake stuff out there, clearly, but there are people that buy it. But just realize that there's an effort right now, which I know most of you know, to just aggressively gaslight you, in my opinion, to just get you to hesitate right now. But whether I'm right about that or not, it's about trying to distract you from what's really going on. As you all know, this is interesting. Ashley St. Clair, which is Elon Musk's, whatever they call it, baby mama. That was just the headline somebody put out. All of MAGA is paid and they coordinate their messaging in lockstep via group chats. Now, I don't think that's any different than the other side. I think that really, as my point goes, I think it's just the way our government operates. And this is the way they keep us teeter-tottering and balanced on so we don't focus on the fact that we never get what's promised. So we're always pointing at the other side. It's very simple. All of these people came to the conclusion that after what they saw, and this was the World Health, which I forget the acronym. Basically, that their thought was that Trump needs his ballroom. I'm thinking of the wrong one. Anyway, the point is the ballroom is what she's highlighting here, but there's plenty of examples in this. And what she's talking about is the fact that the moment that they realize they think that Trump needs this, he's in danger, they just coordinated and bull rushed the narrative. Their first thought was Trump needs the ballroom. One of the main group chats in which they coordinate the messaging is literally called Fight, Fight, Fight. Now, is that even unique? No, guys. Literally, all of these people, and I would argue maybe out of the side of like a Jack Posobiec, who I clearly think is some kind of coordinator. Either way, these people, in many cases, believe that they're doing the right thing. Even lying to you is the right thing because we're fighting the evil Democrats. You see how broken that becomes, and the Democrats do the same thing. Now, at some higher level, I think people know that they're just being dishonest, but a lot of active people in this who are willing to lie and cheat and steal believe they're doing it all for some higher cause. That is the worst misdeception of all this, because people are doing the worst things, fighting against their own interest while thinking they're doing it for the same thing they're fighting for. Or rather, I said that wrong, that they're doing it against their own interest when they think they're fighting for those interests. And this is, of course, after Trump's attempt on Trump's life at Butler. Yeah, because we're still pretending that's what happened. I mean, utterly ridiculous. So in keeping that in mind, even from Elon Musk's relation, there's things like this going around. Now, this one has been denied by Nick Shirley. There's nothing definitive. Let's put it that way. The title was Leaked MAGA Files Spark Claims Nick Shirley's Viral Rise to Secretly Engineered by the White House. Now, it's not definitive, to be clear on that. You can read through it. It's pretty clear that it's basically a connection, sort of like the Biden's auto pen. Well, we know he's senile, therefore we know he couldn't have. Well, that's not proof. That's your opinion, and you could be wrong, even though logical. The point of this is that they claim that the timing of this in regard to when the White House literally used his first post about Somali fraud in Minnesota and then bull rushed this entire thing based on what we can now literally prove. In the moment we were proving they were basically using a construct to manipulate how they conducted their operations. What did I tell you right in the beginning? Well, the program they're pointing to very much was about fraud, except it was dealt with largely during Biden's administration, where many people actually went to jail. And there was not really much more they discovered post that in this situation. They just simply used that to act like they've discovered this whole big thing, but it was based on something real. So it was hard for people to decipher. And ultimately, they just walking up to random daycares going, let me see your children. Like, what in the hell, guys? This guy, look, if anybody who is intelligent enough can see that this kid didn't have any ability to actually, you could listen to him talk, guys. I mean, it's like looking at John Fetterman and pretending like he wrote some novel. He did not. Okay, it's obvious, in my opinion. I could be wrong. The point here is that clearly the timing of it was very suspect, and it was built off of what he did. And all of a sudden, he's popping up in Spain and all these same things. It's just very strange to me. But whether it's not, it was coordinated by the White House, I believe a lot of this is wildly engineered. And look at what happened in the Minnesota conversation. Look at what happened in a ton of these conversations. I mean, just even a larger step back, which we're kind of generally pointing to here. I mean, think about where we are with Trump. Think about look what Alex Jones now calling him a globalist. Think about that for a second. And then ask yourself, what about someone like Roseanne Barr or Alex the entire time until he suddenly turned? What do you have? How can we stand back and go, oh, they're just honest or intelligent people? Okay, so they were either lying the whole time or it's too dumb to see it because it didn't change, guys. It wasn't suddenly now. I'll make the point about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Suddenly you saw through him. What about Stargate on day one? You didn't see through that? These people are all dishonest. The fraud, fraud's the wrong word for it. It is fraud. It's fraudulent. But all of this fake political outrage about the debt or whatever else, it's just everything in this system is so obviously fraudulent. And it's standing out to people everywhere. My audience knows this, guys. We've been talking about it forever. But it's becoming very clear. And the reason I think I'm trying to put momentum around this is because average people are beginning to see this. This is just an interesting overlap. Florida Republican could face death penalty after allegedly molesting grandson under new law he voted for. Now, what's crazy, again, this is up in the air, but it's pretty wild. The kid himself is the one who's admitting all this and admitting that they went to some theme park and he took him for ice cream and they molested him and then did it again on Thanksgiving. And so the kid could be making it up. That's always possible, but it's pretty weird. And so, it could also be some political attack if they motivate. How do you get some young kid and his family to do that? It's hard not to believe, but we should question it as much as that's uncomfortable, just like Israel and the rape allegations, right? It's important to do that. But here's the interesting thing about this is that clearly you're not getting a lot of attention on this. Where are all the Republicans talking about pedophiles? It's weird how you suddenly don't care about this. Same thing I would say about the left when they don't do it. But the point is that this guy is a Republican in Florida who passed a law about basically giving the death penalty to people that molest children under 12 and then goes on to molest a children under 12. I mean, if that's what happened, and it does seem that way to me based on it, you can read it all for yourself, is that ultimately you have a guy who is knowingly willing to molest people, if that's the truth, and goes on to pass a law to basically cover that that's who he is. This is politics, guys. The sociopaths gravitate towards this, if not psychopaths. The point I've always made, if you look at the general prevalence in society of psychopathy, sociopathy, the percentage eerily lines up with the percentage of people in politics. I've been saying that my entire career. Look right now, it'll blow your, it's, I think it's interesting. I think you just created a job for sociopaths. They can run your lives. That's what they want to do anyway. Anyway, so that's another example of just a two-faced fraudulent politician that's literally everywhere. Now, excuse me. In the conversation of anarchy, there's nobody better to talk to or to look into, to read the books of, to discuss the illusion of authority and what anarchism actually means than someone like Larkin Rose. Here's an interview we did, The Illusion of Authority and the Collapse of the Two-Party Paradigm. He was seeing this as well in 2024, recognizing that people were seeing through it. Even he acknowledged a bigger interest in ideas that he's been fighting to get attention on his entire career and sees more when I talk to him then than ever. It's not a secret, guys. I just wish people could acknowledge it and stop, being shouted down by people who act like you're just being hopeful or hopium. I think there is a level of hope. Hopium is not hope. You should have hope. Have hope that things will go the way you want them to. Hopium is but letting that hope guide your decisions as if it's the reality. But realize that it's there. I've been saying it for a long time. There is a change happening right now, and people are starting to see these things that they have been for a very long time. And if we hesitate, we'll miss the opportunity. So in the idea of the fraudulent element, the first few things really do line up with that very same point. Trump temporarily waives higher beef tariffs in a bid to lower prices. Well, this is just funny, and everyone's making this point as if this somehow proved it to you. What do we tell anybody with the basic understanding of how these things always go? Told you what? You will pay the cost. And weird how that's ended up being the reality. And all these insiders and all these fake MAGA people were screaming about how you don't understand it all. And yep, here we are. And that's not this point. That was when they clearly recognized that you were paying. Oh, and then they gave them refunds and gave the companies refunds, even though they raised their prices to meet the demand, and you still pay those prices today. So I argue that some level there was a coordinated element there. But now Trump comes around after screaming that your tariffs don't make you pay more. You guys are fake news conspiracy theory. Then says, well, guess what? I'll lower those tariffs to lower the prices. Oh, okay. So they literally directly correlate with the price. But you know this, guys. You didn't need them to tell you today. You already knew it because it's self-evident if you looked into how they operate. Or if you watch this show, right when this first started, at least with Trump's current iteration of this and before. I forget if I don't think I had much highlighted in here. Bottom line was that it says Trump announced Friday that he will waive higher tariffs on ground beef in a bid to lower prices for consumers who are facing historically high beef costs. Why? Because of him. Or let's just say the U.S. government, because there's plenty of actions from before with Biden that add to it as well. But right now, it's largely because of what is currently happening with the straight and other actions he's taken before this, specifically in regard to beef, guys. Yeah, there was something else, but I'll leave it there because it's just, we go on from that. But here, I'm just laughing about this. Here's Peter Schiff, chief economist, global strategy. He comes out and says, that was this morning, Trump proudly announced the deal to lower beef prices by reducing quotas and tariffs on imported beef. But that's also an admission that tariffs increase prices by America. If removing those tariffs, lower prices, then imposing them must raise prices. Oh, my mind is blown. It's my point the same. It's August 21. You didn't need Peter Schiff, to tell you that. You could have pieced that together with your basic due diligence on what tariffs, how they operate, what historical realities have been, and understand that, or watch the show as we were telling you and walking you through it. But bombshell, Peter Schiff broke down the inside, this is what you get. It's just funny to me. But Mr. Sausage points out in regard to this very point, Fox News says, President Trump announces his new push to lower ground beef. He says, today I concluded a deal to substantially lower the price of ground beef for working American families, as everyone knows under President Biden. Of course, that's where it all started. Beef prices soared at their well, guys, everything did under the COVID-19 timeframe. And so this is what this administration is using aggressively. And Trump played into that just like anybody else. But yeah, it's still Biden's. I'm not taking Biden's side. Biden is just as corrupt and accountable as Trump. The point is that pointing to what happened during COVID that they were all a part of, as if that makes what you're doing now somehow a huge win, is a lie. Because ultimately what you would aim at if you want to make it a win is what it was before COVID-19 spiked everything. And even then, I understand that he still has to come down from that, but realize that it's like the gas prices going up more than double and then going down $1. And he's like, oh my God, everything's amazing. Well, it's still up from where it was before. It's anybody smart enough could have seen through that. So he says that they soared the fastest rate of the American beef herd fell to its smallest size in modern history. As we worked, and it goes back a long time for many different narratives of pandemics or, any number of things where they're culling herds for different reasons. As we work to rebuild this herd and help our ranchers, by the way, most of them are calling Trump out right now, farmers, ranchers, most of them, as far as I can tell, for the next 90 days. The United States will allow up to 300,000 metric tons of product for ground beef. Oh, good. So 90 days, some cheap prices. Then we'll go right back to it. That'll work out. And it says, we have a commitment that this beef will be sold at 25% below current market price. Oh, so now you're controlling the price? What's that called again? Did we talk about that? It's just silly. And on top of that, why would he have the ability to tell these companies what they can sell them for? They're probably going to not follow that lead anyway, because they don't legally have to do what he tells them to when it comes to the price setting. He'll probably attack their companies like he does with everything else. But it says this deal will reduce prices for Americans while giving space for our great American beef herd to grow again. Okay, so he's taken action that's led to this, like directly. And then 90 days of some lower tariffs that you also created and act like that's going to bring some kind of change. It's a momentary blip. And that's even if it comes to pass. This is a Truth Social post. He's done tons of these things that don't even end up happening. But Mr. Sausage says, just in time for the midterms. Where was this in the past year and a half? Isn't that the point? If this has been going up, why wouldn't you have done this at any other point? Because his agenda was more important in that moment than you and your prices, as he's told you many times, as I'll show you right here. But as Mr. Sausage writes, and I agree, everything they do is artificial. Artificial is a good word for it. Here is what he said when asked about the Iran war back in May. You guys saw it at the time. I played it for you.
When you're negotiating with Iran, Mr. President, to what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon.
Not even a little bit. How, to what degree are you thinking about American interests when dealing with this? Meaning that we know that what you're doing affects our prices at home. As you told us, the straight, everything. Not even a little bit, he says. Now, of course, as I said at the time, that's Trump just going, I'm tough and strong and I don't care at all. I trust what I'm doing. But then goes on to make statements about how he cares. So it's he wants to bolster in front of the press. But at the same time, he said it out loud. So it matters. He said, not even a little bit. I don't think, and frankly, I think that's more the truth than anything. He does not consider your needs at all. And this is a placation. Here's 90 days of some slightly lesser prices that probably won't really develop because they'll keep the prices up. And ultimately, I don't want to watch. It's a prediction. It's a thought. Watch. I believe it won't actually change that much. And even if it does, it won't change enough to make a difference from where it was before we got here. I hope I'm wrong, as always. I mean, I don't want this to be a problem for Americans. But if it is, it's because of the government that has allowed this. Now, in a totally separate story that's completely unrelated, a heartbreaking investigation revealed that Trump's Bureau of Land Management is systematically, I always do that, rounding up thousands of Americans' wild horses and quietly selling them off to buyers who are shipping them to slaughterhouses. That seems completely unrelated. Before, the U.S. government rarely sold wild horses, but since Trump took office, government sales have more than doubled. Slaughterhouses pay up to $750 for wild horse. That's disgusting. The fact that it's even happening is disgusting. The fact that, but it says the Bureau of Land Management is nominally in charge of protecting these 73,000. Yep, that's all that's left. 73,000 or so wild horses who roam America's public lands in the West. But yeah, let's round them up and kill them because why? Why not anyway? Let's tear down the forest. Let's use all this public land. Let's just, who cares? I mean, guys, that's not a joke. This current administration, more than I've ever seen, is just, signing executive orders to bring down rainforest or to get rid of endangered species and you may not care about any of that. But the point is, these things have a very real effect on the way that our the world operates, or specifically in this country when you come to ecosystems, but it really has a global effect when you're talking about species extinction. But on top of that, though, the idea that you're just rounding them up and killing them for what? For money? But of course, I'm kind of joking. The Bureau is sending our wild horses to the slaughterhouse is the truth, according to the New York Times. I'm kind of being facetious when I try to not say, but say that it's connected to the beef point. I'm kind of joking. But I mean, think about the weird overlap. I just thought that was disgusting. You're sending horses to the slaughterhouse and suddenly we've got cheap beef. I doubt that's what's happening. But overall, it's just a gross reality of what these people are doing. I'd imagine Republicans, Democrats, anybody who just has why is this what we're okay with? Why do you get the right to just execute horses in the wild to make some money? Doesn't that show you how desperate they are? 73,000. Do the math. That's not even that much money, guys. Or they want the land for something, probably data centers. I mean, there's only a few ways this goes. Now, on Fox News, what are you doing to bring the beef prices down? Fox asks. Because clearly we know that that's what part of what's happening. What are you doing to counteract that? Well, you won't be surprised about the answer.
By asking you what the Department of Agriculture is doing to bring beef prices down for Americans.
Well, first of all, Jackie, it's so great to be on with you again. Thank you so much for having me. Listen, what we are facing in America today is the direct result of a war on cattle by the previous administration. Frankly, a war.
Right. And that's exactly why when we started Trump's administration, that's where the prices. Oh, no, that's not what was the case. They went up after what's been going on, but somehow it's only a response of what Biden did from before. Well, look, yes, that has an effect on where we are, but the prices when Trump took over to now is what we're discussing. There was a guy in front of a bunch of working class people out there screaming about how the issue with water and everything else is because of what they shut down in the power plants. And guys, it's so willfully dishonest, and it's so too is any of the rest of them. Biden lied through his teeth when he was out there. They're all the same. That's the point. They're fraudulent. They're artificial. But the idea that you just kick it's Biden did it. A year and a half into your administration, you're pretending like the price. I mean, this is how stupid they believe we are, or how desperate they are. You can decide. It just kills me. As she writes, Patriotic Blonde, zero accountability. Okay, here's Rick Scott. Our national debt just hit $40 trillion. That's true. That's, unprecedented when it comes to debt, when it comes to, Trump is breaking all the records in the wrong way, especially when it comes to what he promised you. But it's all Biden's fault somehow. Or just as soon as we get done with the Iran war, it's all going to tilt back down. No, it won't, guys. This is bad, he writes. Congress needs to get spending under control and balance this budget. Americans deserve better. Oh, by the way, fact check. Rick Scott voted for the one big beautiful bill, which raised the statutory debt limit by $5 trillion and is projected by CBO to increase deficits by $3.4 trillion over 10 years. But yeah, keep telling us why we need to do. If you cared, you wouldn't have voted for that. Or if you want to look at it a different way, you could argue that he had no choice because of the broken system. I argue it's more the former, but that the broken system is like they only have one choice. Like the NDAA, like this is the idea that these people, you either pass the things that include some of the stuff that you want for your constituents, or you don't at all. And so they do it. But that includes the 219 and whatever else. I mean, who knows what it is? At the end of the day, whether the system is broken so they can't do it or not, that's my point. Either it's broken beyond repair because they can't change it if they wanted to, or they're also corrupt, they don't care. You take your pick. I still argue the change is needed. And you get the same thing from all of them. And it's not unique to left or right, guys. Here's Nancy Mace. And this is Dave Benner. He says, Republican Party in a nutshell, my entire life. Well, guess what? Exactly the same from the Democrats. Nancy Mace says, just voted on the one big beautiful bill. And it was yes. And she wrote yes, sorry. Nancy Mace. So that was July 3rd. And then this is last year, right? And then July 1st this year. We have nearly $40 trillion in debt. Republicans and Democrats did that. Oh, you're so brave and you're so insightful, right? She's trying to play into the thing like, I see it all. They're all corrupt. Well, you're one of them, okay? And you're one of the most dishonest in this. You're so obviously a blind supporter of the team, but try to play it as you're not. And they're all doing this. They're all out there doing their dance around this. And I mean, I think Massey even called them out. Like, look, if you're out there pretending to care about this and you voted for this, shut up. Paraphrasing. Okay, here, as you might have seen going around, because it is also relevant, and this is an important part, I want to stress, I don't believe it's important that we need to expose Trump as a fraud or dishonest, or I think everybody sees it, even the ones still choosing to support him, because it's just that obvious. I say things like that a lot over the years, and my track record is very, very good. And I said this in January about what he's doing now, and I think I'm right. I think we can prove that. I think I'm right about this now. In any case, my point in saying that, I don't think I need to continue to go, oh, here, he challenged this. I will, as it's relevant. But I believe that ship has sailed. I think this person everyone sees him. Nonetheless, it's important to highlight this as a fraudulent artificial moment where Trump steps up and I think actually says probably what he meant at the time, but now doesn't care, which is that if we pass 24 trillion in debt, the whole country's going down. Well, here we are at 40 trillion. So as Truth, Souljaw says, national debt will balloon further as the Pentagon awards fat contracts to war profiteers to restock supplies depleted by wars in Iran and Ukraine. You know, the ones that Ukraine and everything else he said he would end, actually told you that it was ended and concluded it in his tally, and it's still going on like all the rest, and to develop and deploy new advanced weapon systems. With Israel, that was the main part about the AI, autonomous drones, and quantum and all the different things they're getting involved in. The empire's global war machine has bankrupted America, but there's no end in sight. So here's the contrast. Also take note of the way Trump speaks. You'll notice it. Listen to what you hear from him today. His kind of rambling, nonsensical, like not just, what's the word, where it's just kind of like thought pops in his head. He jumps to it. That's how he used to be too. But where today it's like he can't even get back. I think it's because he's getting older, which that's everybody, anyone getting there, whether Biden or Trump. But there's an element of it that makes you question, like with Biden, whether there's something else, because there's a very clear decline here in the way he speaks, the way his train of thought goes. And you'll see what I mean when you play this video.
We really do have to get going. Because if we have another 3 or 4 years, we're at 18 trillion now. We're soon going to be at 20 trillion. According to the economists, who I'm not big believers in, but nevertheless, this is what they're saying. that 24 trillion, we're very close. That's the point of no return. $24 trillion. We will be there soon. That's when we become Greece. That's when we become a country that's unsalvageable.
Well, Donald Trump, we seem to share an opinion there.
And we're going to be there very soon. We're going to be there very soon.
Yep. And he did that too. He did that too, just like all the rest. And now we're at 40 trillion. Now think about what he's saying. And we're at 40 trillion. So if this was such a big and important problem, why didn't he stop it at 30 trillion? You already know the answer. You can choose to lie to yourself if that makes you sleep better at night. The truth is, guys, these people don't care about us. They really do not. And this is like the clip that Steve plays with Charlie, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your government hates you. We need to understand the reality of this power dynamic. Otherwise, we're never really going to change anything. As Patriotic Blonde also points out, the U.S. has added, get this, and the chart's here for you to check out, $550 billion to the national debt since July 1st. That's over $13 billion a day. Do the math on dividing up $13 billion just amongst, I was going to say amongst Americans. I mean, do that. That would shock you. But take the reality that, 40 trillion is just such an insane number. But realize how much money that is and what that could do to any number of locations. Or, the end of the day, that's how much money a day is being added to the debt so they can go on doing things that Americans do not want. Just like COVID-19, like the Iran war, like Stargate, like everything else either side, or rather all of your government is doing. Ryan Grimm points out, or rather highlights the Kabisi letter, which says on the 19th, it's official. On July 31st, we called for the U.S. government intervention as long-term borrowing costs hit 2008 levels. So for those new to that, that's the collapse. Right? That's the subprime mortgage collapse that ultimately created a borderline economic global catastrophe. And then they bailed them out, said, fix it, and they gave themselves bonuses instead. And then what most people don't talk about is that right after that, and I almost cussed for some reason, right after that, it was like immediately back to everything they were doing before. And this is so crazy. I made this point right afterward. Or technically, it would have been, when was I doing that? It wouldn't have been then. Anyway, I remember making this point when it was that was coming back around, maybe the anniversary or something. But the point was ultimately saying, look, you can list these things off and go down the list of what people argue they caused this. And every one of them started up again, and the same people, and they just named them differently. Even watch the movie, they go at The Big Short, and right at the end, they break down how they simply just repackaged it and called it something else. And here we are. And it's just, and so it goes on to say, today it happened. The U.S. Treasury is doubling buybacks to $4 billion per operation for liquidity support. What comes next? Let us explain. It says on the same point they made on July 31st, the note yield rose to 5.27%, the highest since 2007. This officially marks a plus 450 basis point rally since the low seen in the 2020 pandemic. Even as the Fed kept interest rates paused at the July meeting, it did nothing. Yields keep climbing. By the way, as I'm reading through this, I reached out to Catherine to potentially come on. She's super busy, so it might not happen, but to come on to talk about, like a larger, where the, just a larger financial read on where the country is. Because there's a lot going on. And we all sense there's pretty dark. But he goes on to say, in regard to the yields keep climbing. And it says, why? First, we began, speaking for the Kabisi letter, that year with market expectations for 3 rate cuts in 2026. This quickly shifted to 2 hike rates expected in 2026. Expectations shifted for rates to be 125 basis points higher in a matter of months. The 2025 global rate cut cycle came to a halt. It says, as the Iran war drove oil prices over 100. Now, that's important because at one point, people were adamantly arguing that over 100 would collapse the economy. Now, clearly, I think either that wasn't true or there's been measures in place because that happened a while ago. It was what? It was 120, 115 for a while over the Iran war. But it says, as the Iran war drove prices to 100 plus, inflation expectations hit 5% by November. This left the Fed with no option but to halt rate cuts and begin considering rate hikes. Month-over-month inflation in March and April came in at plus 0.9% and plus 6% respectively. And it says today, oil prices were well below their recent highs, but remain at 55% above pre-war levels. Furthermore, Fed expectations have shifted toward a continued pause through the end of 2026. Meanwhile, yields keep on pushing higher amid record deficit spending and inflation worries. Today's intervention by the U.S. Treasury is notable. Treasury buybacks work by repurchasing older, less liquid bonds, giving investors a steady buyer while new debt insurance continues. The goal is to improve liquidity and ease upside in yields. In other words, they blinked. This also marks the second most notable bond market intervention by the Trump administration. In April 2025, President Trump said he was watching the bond market when he decided to announce his 90-day tariff pause. So this is now above the peak seen then. Take a look at the wording of the press release. The doubling of buybacks to $4 billion per operation is in effect from September 9th through November 4th. However, the Treasury says it will provide more information about future buybacks on November 4th. We expect more intervention. Now, just to cut to the chase and what Ryan's pointing out, are you guys seeing that? It's literally not, oh, there it goes. It wasn't letting me click it. Trump is going to pump billions of dollars into the bond market to push down interest rates through the election. That's his opinion. Then let everything fall apart again. Man, his opinion. I agree. Not sure I've seen a more nakedly electoral use of this amount of money before for such a targeted amount of time. Treasury announces increased sizes of nominal long end liquidity support buybacks beginning September 9th. I mean, overall, what we're looking at is these people, whether it's designed to collapse everything or simply that they're just so bad at this or so incompetent that it's happening, so it's doing that and then trying to profiteer on the way down. That's what continues to seem like the most logical reality here. As Charlie continued to put it, literally stealing the silverware from the White House. Like, that's how cheap this is and how completely sophomoric. But everyone sees this. And the question is, why are people not, at some level doing something about it? Why? Not even just this, but any number of things. The illegal war that's still going on. Why isn't Congress impeaching him? By the way, that's one thing that Sam was talking about, is impeaching people who are actually breaking the law. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, lastly on this segment, the point about the illusion, the fraud, the artificial elements here. I think this is exactly the same thing. Now, by the way, I had a bunch of other stuff I may go into in the next show about Alex Jones and the reality of his, because this is a clip from him right here with Marjorie Green, just the same thing. Like, think about that. The same point I made with Roseanne Barr. They're out there right now still advocating for why Trump is the best, who promised everything and delivered on everything. It's insane that they still have even a following when you can prove that's not true. It's a cult following, like she's pointing out here. Well, then, but they were absolutely a part of this, both of them, way beyond the point when it was obvious. So are they opportunists? Are they just cowards? You could decide. But I think it's really interesting to think about for him as well. So you didn't see Stargate? That wasn't enough for you? Like, you didn't see all the things up until then? And on top of that, guys, it's about right now this jumping ship moment and saying, oh, he's a globalist. Well, after the fact, even though he was, and right now still talking like Democrats are globalists. So it's also scattered. And it seems so desperate. And I think what this leads to is both a combination of opportunism for people who are being misled by those above them, like an Alex, I argue, or people in politics who are just trying to grab on to whatever develops as the new movement that's still part of the same broken system. So let me play this clip first.
Not in a cult. I am not in a cult. People that think they have to defend every single letter or word or sentence of President Trump, if you think that's what you have to do, you are in a cult.
And by the way, as much as Alex started to call him out on things throughout this, he was lockstep in the beginning of this administration. Like they all were. Very hardcore Democrats trying to kill him and we have to defend him. And so that was what you were a part of. So just because you decided to break away earlier than the rest doesn't mean you weren't a part of that. But see, that has to be acknowledged. And the same goes for Marjorie Taylor Greene. You realize you broke with him, like Iran was a huge one, right? But think about everything that happened before that. All of the endless amounts of double crossings and lies and deceptions. I mean, again, Stargate was the first thing. An AI vaccine platform and everything else around it, that wasn't enough for you guys to realize it was the opposite direction? Or the fact that he continued to support the Ukraine war, continued to support the ongoing genocide? Right in the beginning, guys, right in the beginning. And then you didn't go, oh, right away, he lied, I'm broken, I'm moving on. No, You doubled down. You backed him. You stood with him. And then only when it was in your benefit, in your interest, or when it was just way too, like when ultimately it got to a point to where you were not gaining anymore, you suddenly broke. That's what I see. You tell me where I'm wrong. Now, maybe at the end of the day, they now mean what they say. I don't know. But that's very, very, it speaks to their ability to see through things, or when they will hide things that are counter, they go against their interest, right? That at that time, standing up and going, Trump lied, would have been bad for their audiences, bad for their career. But now they read the writing on the wall. Oh, well, TLAV's been cutting down all the weeds, showing people that he's actually a fraud. Now that they're open to it a little bit more, now I can jump on and go, that's the thing, and I broke the news. That's what tends to happen.
I am not in a cult. I elected President Trump. I fought for him and put him in the White House. And again, I'll remind everybody, voted with him 98% of the time.
Okay. Isn't that my point? Can we go down that 98% of the time and realize that 50% of that were things that challenge what you claim you believe in? 50% is off the top of my head, but guys, I mean, there's a ton we covered and called her out for as well. So at the same point, recognize that you stood with him while you should have known better, way past the point of seeing it, and then decided to call him out, which I'm still glad about. And I'll still hope that you're being true about it. But that matters to me.
Put him in the White House because I believed in America First policies. I don't believe in fighting every foreign war. I do not believe in...
Then why'd you support the war on, I'm at the same point. There's plenty of hypocrisy here.
Calling affordability crisis. I don't believe that's a hoax. I don't believe raping 14 and 16-year-olds is a hoax.
Yeah, Epstein, right? Like that wasn't a huge one. You realize people like Alex Jones continue to support Donald Trump through the Epstein lie? How do you not call that out? So here's the point that I wanted to make off of this, right? That they're talking about you're in a cult if you still support Trump. Now that's not the MAGA movement, because that's the people they're talking about believe, if they're actually honest, I don't believe they are, but the point is the people out there that still want what he pretended he was doing. A movement is not necessarily defined by the one who's leading it. It's a movement, guys. If the leader suddenly does the wrong thing or doesn't go with what they want, people can replace the leader. The movement is there. Now, you still may think it's illusion or dishonest or whatever. It's trapped in the partisanship, so I argue it's not going to see it through, but it's still people that wanted parts of the things that we're talking about. And why he promised them those things is because he and they all know that we want what I'm talking about, or at least what they asked for. But that's part of what I'm talking about. So as it's Tucker and all the rest, which I'm guarantee Alex is going to glom onto, just as the next spun off political party, or the point is, at this point, if you still defend Trump, you're in a cult. And I said, just as the next spun off political party or politician will be in this utterly unsalvageable, corrupted system. Only when we learn this long documented reality and consciously choose to get off the fraudulent uniparty hamster wheel will we possibly move beyond this dark time. As usual, it'll get very, very little reach because of how challenging these things are for some, and because these platforms, in my opinion, very much suppressed. But, taking this to another step, but not just Trump, but specifically the falsehood of our government, whether RFK or Trump or whoever's currently there. In this case, it's Trump and RFK Jr. This is what I said before. I can't believe that we didn't see this. This is something that Derek put out in 2020. And that interesting overlap, by the way. When this came out, we were the first people to put this out. At least as far as I can remember. Let me put it this way. I hadn't seen anybody else cover it, and we were doing it of our own volition. So whether somebody else was at the same time doing it or before, it wasn't based on somebody else's coverage. And ultimately, RFK Jr. and Defender picked it up, published it. Then they got pushback, acting like we were wrong or lying, and they pulled the article. We were vindicated. This was reality. This was proven to be the case. And I just thought it was so interesting to show that, especially with him now a part of this administration. Frankly, I just think they got enough pressure from people in the community that, didn't agree, and they pulled it, but they were wrong. Vaccine bait and switch, 2020. As millions pulled from WHO, Trump gives billions to Gates-founded Gavi. And that's the simple point. And everyone, all the fake MAGA people out there, the ones still supporting Trump today, the Benny Johnson types, were like, yay, he did it. Right? He did it. He pulled, whoever was the time. I don't think that was even the case at the time. Whoever the person was, all the fake supporters were just saying, he did it. He ended it. He ended the WHO. Well, all we showed you was he gave the money to Gavi, which then gave the money to WHO, which is very easy to see. In fact, they gave them way more. So it amounted to an increase in amount for the WHO. Simple, right? Now, you could argue Trump didn't know that. but it was obvious that it was going in the same direction. Now with his still alignment with Davos and WHO and the WEF, he's still tapped into all these things. But it happened again the next time, the beginning of this administration. What happened was they said, well, there was a funding pull, and we were arguing that there was another way, basically another kind of lie, to put it as simple as possible, not to get into it all again, because there's a whole breakdown of how it went. The point was we didn't believe that they were going to, and the proof is in the pudding, is that right here, as of the July 31st, I think, is when this article's from, Trump administration unfreezes $600 million for Gavi. Because in the beginning of the administration, they froze it. And everyone said, see, we told you, and we didn't believe it. Here we are. For global vaccine effort. That's very real. And Derek says, why is the Trump administration once again giving nearly $1 billion to Gavi? Bill Gates funded Gavi. Then it wasn't, that would have been one of the things I was going to play. I thought Alex Jones told us that Bill Gates was going to prison. Oh, that's right. He turned on Trump. So Trump's the bad guy now. Okay. Trump administration unfreezes $600 million for Gavi. And then he adds to his article, and everybody points it out. By the way, he reported on this in 2020. Trump ended support for WHO while continuing the support here. Some people called it fake news, and he was right. So here is, actually, before we're going to get into the actual breakdown of it. I mean, it's really just, some basic information, but I think it's important. But here, let's not forget, here is what Secretary Kennedy said, Archie Jr., about Gavi in 2025. So let this sink in. I'm going to probably play the beginning of it, and I'll read this actually, about what he says the problem with Gavi. Then we'll read the article about what they say allowed this to happen. And you'll see that they're lying and are fraudulent and artificial yet again in its zeal to promote universal vaccination. That is one of the main goals. Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which they've just given $600 million, has neglected the key issue of vaccine safety. Oh, good. Let's give them money. When vaccine safety issues have come before Gavi, it treated them not as a patient health problem, but as a public relations problem. So that sounds like a systemic corruption problem, right? This is not even a year ago. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Gavi partnered with the WHO to recommend best practices for social media companies to silence dissenting views and to stifle free speech and legitimate questions during that period. Gavi should consider the best science available. Oh, you mean like gold standard, using another vaccine to compare it with a vaccine like you just did? The so-called gold standard, which you're lying about? Even when that science contradicts established paradigms. Yeah, that would be great if you actually did those things. It should define success, not just in terms of the number of vaccines delivered, but on their rigorously measured overall impacts. None of which is actually happening with Gavi. I call on Gavi to re-earn the public trust. Okay, where did that happen, RFK? Where did they re-earn our trust? It didn't happen, in case you're confused. And he says, and justify the $8 billion that America has provided since 2001. Until that happens, the United States won't contribute to Gavi. And then they just did, though. So he lied. Or he doesn't, look, whether he lied or not, you think Trump cares or the system cares what RFK Jr. has to say? He's being used. He's a face to make you think he cares about your health, even though they've challenged almost every single thing RFK ever fought for and have gone the literal opposite direction. Even the minor wins, even the food diet was ultimately rolled back to a small degree. They're really not caring, guys. But the point is, until that happens, we won't continue. Well, that didn't happen, RFK Jr. So an honest person would be speaking about this right now on Twitter going, now, I told you this wasn't going to happen. I don't agree with this move. We shouldn't be doing it, but that's happening. Yeah, but you know what? Trump will then probably fire him, sue him, whatever else. And they're not being honest with you. Whatever the hindrance is, these people are not telling you the truth.
I'm pleased to have this opportunity to
2025
address the Gavi community. We're living now in a time of upheaval, a time of popular revolt against established institutions that have lost the public trust.
Yeah, you see how they're tapping into what we actually feel, this kind of disillusionment of the broken system, and don't actually care about it. They love to use your momentum to drive you into their agenda.
And that includes medicine. President Trump and I are committed to earning it back.
Are they?
We will do that by preserving what is honest, what serves our country and the world, and we will sweep away that which is not.
Okay, honest. Does that describe what you're seeing in this administration right now? Or at large, the U.S. government? I don't care whether he meant this or not. It's just not what they're doing.
A major concern that I share with the president is how the World Health Organization and Gavi partnered together during the COVID-19 pandemic to recommend best practices for social media companies to silence dissenting views, to stifle.
And that never changed. There's no acknowledgement or admission or statement of why they won't do it again. Still there. Now they're funding him again.
Free speech and legitimate questions during that period. In addition, Gavi has continued to make questionable recommendations encouraging pregnant women to receive COVID-19 vaccines.
Yep, which still happens.
Having said that, there's much that I admire about Gavi, especially its commitment to making medicine affordable to all the world's people.
Yeah. Especially the commitment. People can misspeak. I do it all the time. But especially drives me crazy. Especially when people say especially.
Gavi has done that part of its job very well. Unfortunately, in its zeal to promote universal vaccination, it has neglected the key issue of vaccine safety. When vaccines...
All right, you get the point. It goes on for 4 more minutes. It's simple reality, guys. Everything he's pointing out as a problem, from what I can tell, is Gavi 101, and it hasn't changed. It's the same agenda with Bill Gates driving. The institutional direction is the same. So how do you explain that? Here is July 29th, Reuters. Trump administration unfreezes $600 million for Gavi for global vaccine effort. Global vaccine effort. I mean, even in a slight way, does that align with their agenda? You ask for conservatives, Republicans, anybody, is Trump leading a global vaccine effort? I just don't know why. It's just so ridiculous. Why don't they try not to be that obvious? I don't know. I think there's an agenda there somewhere. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said in June that it was time to re-engage with the Geneva-based Global Alliance for Gavi. Right. Because why? Did something change? No, it's the same thing that you guys all called the problem. And now re-engage, just like every other thing they do. They give you 6 months and pretend like they never said it. The previous month, Gavi's chief executive, Sanya Nishtar, has said Gavi was moving away from vaccines that included a mercury-based preservative. Like, we're still pretending. Like, think about how crazy that is. How obviously dangerous the aluminum and mercury and these things are. And there's still conversations about, like, that's what we're still fighting for. That's like saying, make sure there's no arsenic in your cereal. And they go, well, we don't know for sure. It's just insane to me. We're so far past that. Should have been removed decades ago. It still matters, by the way. It should still happen. But what I'm highlighting is that what he did over there in that video was not, as soon as they talk about, that's what they're saying. They have said Gavi is moving away, not stopping, moving away, which is a slow, gradual, probably 45-year process to move away from mercury-based preservatives. So it's not even stopping them. But he didn't say once they move away from mercury-based vaccines that we'll suddenly work with them again. He named vaccine issues. He named corruption, censorship, working with global agendas this title, the Reuters article wants you to believe that one move was what changed everything. The U.S. State Department said in a statement on Wednesday the decision to release funds was taken right after they committed to removing the quote is this. Right after Gavi committed to, quote, work towards transitioning mercury-containing vaccines and expanding access to newer mercury-free alternatives. To work towards transitioning. So not even transitioning. We'll work towards beginning that transition at some point. Language matters, guys, and that's insane to me. Even though we know it wasn't really about that. That was one part of a larger conversation, and the idea that we're still fighting to get mercury out of these things, it shows you how broken this is. And here we are. They're now giving up $600 million to the same group that we all know is a problem, right again through the Trump administration. It shouldn't surprise you. Elon Musk, here he is on August 19th. Underneath this post about the golden age of intelligence and problem solving, cancer vaccines incoming. Yay, that's what we all want, isn't it? Cancer vaccines. Well, guess what? We just talked about one, that it's very dangerous. That's something that actually one of our community is dealing with and suffering from because it's actually very damaging. And we've talked about it on this show. We'll come to it in a second. Keytruda, what's called. Elon Musk says synthetic RNA will cure many diseases. Yeah, that's August 19th, guys, 2026. How many times have we played? I mean, in fact, I opened this on the kind of cycling video that plays on, I think, Rumble and what's the other one? Locals, I think. It just kind of plays the video before we start, like on a cycle. And I today used the one with Elon Musk. Checks all the boxes. Maybe I'll play it on the way out. And one of them is mRNA vaccines, 100%. And on top of that, as you know, we talked about this during COVID-19, Elon Musk partners with Gates-funded biotech company to produce mRNA microfactories. It's called CureVac. One of plenty he's involved with, by the way. And so it's just wanting to point out that today he's still pushing this very direction. And as much as he wants to talk about how, yes, it was misused, we all know that. The idea that we're still screaming in the direction of using this experimentally, they never even slowed down, guys. They're still giving the COVID shot. It's literally Comirnaty. They're giving them direct Moderna money for new mRNA shots. They just funded Pfizer for 2 new COVID shots on top of the ones they're already giving. They're working on multiple self-amplifying COVID-19 shots right now, and well as flu, as well as universal flu, mRNA. It's all openly in the pipeworks. And yet, people are still going, yay, Trump. Yeah, know what they are. Either too stupid to see that they're not getting what they asked for or don't care. RNA will cure many diseases. By the way, it looks like she's claiming anyway that she posted a comment underneath that very post, which is then when he turned it to subscribers only. Exactly, guys, because people who are afraid of having their ideas challenged are not real. They're not honest. In fact, or they very much don't even believe in their own ideas, which is kind of, or understand that they're hollow statements. She says, look at what happened after I replied a couple of hours ago. It's because they replied to his post with a screenshot of, the CureVac conversation. They know what they're trying to hide, guys. They know whether people don't support them, like in an honest sense, right? Like Mary Talley Bowden, by the way, who is champion of Maha until she realized it was, a lie. At the very least, again, like the MAGA point that Trump and RFK Jr. were lying about believing in it. They're still part of a movement to make America healthy again. It's just not them being a part of it, as in Trump and RFK Jr. But she says, in response to that, synthetic RNA has created many diseases. Exactly. She says, I've never seen anything like it with any other product on the market. Look at that. What is going on with this platform? It's weird. Anyway, so created them. Now, isn't that a perfect market for the way that we know this industry works? Keeping it going. Now, Sayer G, I believe, I forget, the founder of Green Med Info, says Elon Musk 5 hours after the data-free pharma press release. mRNA makes curing disease a software problem. A software problem. Isn't that exactly what Moderna was? Exactly. Moderna laid it out as the plug-and-play computer system in your body, and then deleted all that because it was alarming to people, and I still have it on the archive. In fact, the very video that outlines that has been deleted by YouTube. It's almost like they coordinated to hide that for everybody. It's crazy, right? But it says Moderna stock 174% up. Merck 12%. Moderna 174. Moderna. Did we just all forget that we were fighting this? I mean, or that Elon Musk is a champion of all of these things? Who knows, guys? Who knows? Actually, here. It just feels like the right moment. I'll just play the 1-minute version, I think.
Everybody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
Are you vaccinated, if I
yes.
may ask?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pro-vaccination. Yeah. I believe the science is unequivocal.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants. Just think of sensors planted into our brains.
Basically implanted in your skull. So, but it would be flush with your skull. So you basically take out a chunk of skull, put the Neuralink device in there.
You know, when he's doing this, it's so weird. Why is he like almost laughing about it? It's either because it's so crazy, he knows it sounds crazy, or because it's not even actually what he believes he's doing. But what I told you about this, guys, I'm of the mind that they know, that he knows the technology is way beyond that. You have to understand that the idea of this, and it's not a crazy thing. If you look into this, you will clearly see that the level of technology is way beyond a physical implant in the sense of the way he's describing it. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm sure I could be missing something, but I think it's interesting that I remember looking at this going, why is he laughing about that? Why does it make him look, who knows? But understand, though, that when we talk about the reality of the, like, I'll even bring it up, the new DARPA optogenetics platform under Trump, it's what we're talking about. It's something that does not need or require some kind of constant connection or implant. It's about something that can be put into you via, I don't know, injection or aerosol, which is a real thing, and then used and activated from outside using, in this case, light pulsing or different light sources. There's magnetogenetics that use magnetic sources. There's radiogenetics. All those are very real and do not require, and I've talked about this for so long.
You'd put the electrode, you'd insert the electrode threads very carefully into the brain.
It doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you if you take a genetic editing.
It's a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological.
Isn't it crazy that we're still, like, this was 2020, 2021. We were seeing them sell you on what we're living through. The Great Reset, Democrat side. We're watching the Great Reset Republican version. It's all the same thing. Your transhumanism, technocracy. Like, they're literally selling you on the future direction of what they're building. And people pretend, if you're so lost in the partisan lie, you think we're now in a different thing, a new vehicle in a different direction. And people fail to see how obviously it all just kept going.
That's really the essence of the fourth industrial revolution.
A merger with biological intelligence and machine intelligence.
An effort for man to merge with machine in a healthy way.
Yes.
To beat machines, you basically have to merge with machines.
Most likely, yes.
As work is changing, is a universal basic income really a solution to this problem?
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary.
Decarbonization of the economy.
Where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
Maybe these people believe that's what they're doing. Maybe that's what he believes he's fighting for, right? But what does that obviously overlap with that we're currently seeing argued for from a different angle? Monitoring you, tracking your use and statements and, your footprint. It's all the same. It's just a different lens because Democrats were looking at that from that. Well, that was the power. Now Republicans are selling it to the Republican side. It's wild to me how people can't see how fundamentally obvious all of this is. And clearly they're both fighting for the same thing. Maybe at some level, they don't even know that. Who knows? But you can look, it's not even about you can see where the path goes. They're talking about tracking you for saving the environment. They're talking about tracking you to fighting immigrants or whatever the current narrative is. Both things use the same technology. Both things amount to the same endpoint. That's what all this amounts to. And Elon Musk has been Pied Pipering you along the entire time if you've been falling for that.
Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
I mean, my top recommendation, honestly, would be just to have a carbon tax.
This global reset is necessary.
Okay, back to the point. I'll include this, by the way. This was the video. Just Elon checks all the boxes. I always find that. By the way, really quickly, do you know, I notice something all the time. I have these videos that I tend to reshare. Like I'll bring up in a quick example. The doctor's thread, which by the way, on a separate side note, I'm not even able to make threads on this platform anymore. I used to be able to do this where you could add basically click, do videos and click on the last one, add thread. It won't let me do it anymore. I tried multiple times the other day. It's just, this platform is absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, here's my point. I like and share these every single time. And every single time I come back, it's not liked. And all that means is being removed from my list of likes, which is something that should be constant, right? But on top of that, every time I repost it and share it, it never changes. This has been stuck on this amount forever. I'll just include that in case you want to look at it. It's the one about Gaza doctors. This guy's in a new documentary, by the way, just came out, showing you all the same stuff we were talking about, killing children and all. But same thing here. Same thing here. Watch. I'll probably bring this up in the future and you'll see the same thing. A small point. We all know these platforms are manipulating. Hopefully we all know that today. But it's just so grossly manipulative. They know what they're doing and it's so obvious. Now, this is the point. Back to this Sayers post. So he's saying synthetic RNA will cure many diseases. Moderna's stock price soars. He says, what happened? Merck and Moderna's press release said a phase 3 trial of an experimental mRNA vaccine, Keytruda, met its primary endpoint versus Keytruda alone. I mean, these are set up to look like, just like the one RFK Jr. and the rest just gave you. The mRNA flu shot literally caused myocarditis. It literally, they compared it to an old shot. I mean, they're just absolutely gaslighting you, and they know it. You don't think RFK Jr. is aware of that after he just yelled about placebo-based gold standard science? Either he never intended to, or he's not the one allowing that. And Trump's doing it over him, and he's saying, you better not say a word. Who knows? The truth is exactly what we talked about on this. And here is when we discussed this exact conversation, yet again, demonstrating our value of how far ahead we were of this exact point. May 7th, 2023, the new modified RNA. That's what this one is. It's mod RNA, just like the COVID shot, cancer jab. Now, we also recently pointed to it in a news show when we talked about John Fleetwood's coverage of it, which is mRNA 24200. Or this was the one we were discussing, where he talks about the study as well. It's not moving for me, right? They receive injections alone or a combination with this, marked as Keytruda. Just want to cite that back because it's a good breakdown. Also, we have the Moderna information from the show that we covered. Not a joke, by the way. Literally, we covered this from Moderna on their website when this was happening and broke it down as, what did I say? This jab, Keytruda, will destroy your immune system, and how mod RNA is created. And it's important to understand that. And what do you know? Sadly, by the way, somebody, Marshall, who's a longtime friend of us, or in the chat, somebody's like, literally, I think, maybe, I forget whether Orwell or him were first, but one of the very first people who ever ended up in my chat as a mod, or even just in the chat, by the way. He goes back way to the beginning of when I was doing this. And sadly, he's struggling right now through cancer and everything else. And, people who were recommending mainstream directions to him, his family, and so on, have got on Keytruda. And look at what Orwell's saying in the chat. It literally destroyed him. And it's so disgusting that we can see what these things are. And so the point was, it will destroy your immune system in 2023, breaking down what we saw based on their own science. Now, of course, one of them we have. This is the kind of like the MSDS sheet for it, and right through it, we go through it in depth in 2 different shows. In fact, that's one I'll include right there, breaking down how it's just obviously dangerous. Then there was the Moderna page, which now doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't that make you feel good? That was one of the main things we went through, showing you how dangerous this was. Now it's no longer there. Now, I'm sure they've got some other version of it somewhere, but it just shows you how manipulative this is. Moderna, a platform that has never had a successful product to market without emergency authorization. And we're talking about things right now that are arguably based on that because they've never truly removed the EUA underneath it all. Not the main part of it, but as we talked about, there was 2 different sides to it, and that one of them became constant. We covered that a long time ago. Most people probably don't even know that. And he continues, set the irony aside for a moment. Merck and Moderna, pardon me, something's in his allergies, I guess. Merck and Moderna are the same 2 companies behind the COVID-era mRNA shots, as well as obviously Pfizer and Johnson and so on. Many believe are fueling today's rise in cancer. Even ignoring that, the specific announcement has red flags worth examining. One, that the entire announcement, no hazard ratio, no confidence interval, no p-value, no safety, nothing. We met our endpoint. It just shows you what they're aiming for are people in power that make decisions. They don't even care that you think it's safe or not. It's going to be put out there, and people that follow directions will take them. And he goes on to break down all the red flags. There's everything missing from the release. We went over most of this. It's an interim analysis, not a final one. And he points out the, where was it? Read through it. It's many. The point is that this stuff, if you read through it, it shows you an obvious problem. And it's just like the one from the mRNA flu shot, which was that clearly based on the statistics they gave you, like we were during COVID when we showed you the UK stats and proved to you in real time that they were lying to you about what was beneficial or not. It's the same thing. What they're showing you in this information, as I showed you, and that's why I'm not going into it in depth now, in this very conversation with less information, that it was going to do exactly what we're now seeing, exactly what Sayer is pointing out. Sad. Now, also, we pointed out, this is showing you that overlaps with left and right, if you're still in that game. This is from 2023. Biden's America is facing a cancer drug crisis. Over 90% of U.S. cancer centers are reporting shortages. And I simply said, well, get ready for the solution being this COVID shot, or this, mod RNA shot. Now, it didn't necessarily take the fruition, the action during Biden's administration, but they were the ones driving this direction. So if you want to see an obvious connection, realize that you saw it begin under Biden, you saw it finish under Trump. It's like everything else we're highlighting. And on top of that, talking about the kind of part of the mRNA COVID timeframe discussion, I am seeing this come back up. I've seen people here and there wearing them, but the conversation of it, I have seen bubble up a little bit more lately, which is the idea of masks. And I just want to reiterate this. I shouldn't need to, because I'd like to believe this is very clear, and we've seen people more skeptical than ever. Just look into it. Ian Miller puts this out, says absolutely incredible. And this is one of the emails, conversations that's going around. And we don't need their exchanges to, other than proving that we know that they know, but we already knew that. We already knew that they were aware of this because we watched them cover it up, right? But he says, incredible. All of the top COVID experts like Fauci and Rochelle Walensky knew that cloth masks didn't work. Well, guess what? None of them work in regards to being statistically significant in reducing transmission. That is the scientific way to say that. Because it does have some minor effect. The point is, it does not actually make the only thing that matters, a statistically significant difference. Then you get into the fact that it actually has negative effects on your health, bacterial pneumonia, and all the stuff we've gone over, especially since none of them are consistent. The masks are made by different companies that have no standard. There's different particles and fibers, and some have metals. I mean, it's insane, guys. We've been over this so in depth for years. But he says that knew that cloth masks didn't work and were already failing to stop or even slow transmission. And they kept demanding more mask mandates and forced schools and toddlers masks anyway. Okay, this is August 19th. And he does say that, by the way, we talked about this at the time. Well, okay, good. I don't know the work then anyway. Probably. It's irrelevant though. My point is, saying this now is not, all we're highlighting is, look, they said they knew. We knew that because they covered it up. We knew they didn't stop it because the science showed us that. And real world examples showed us that. But it was, what was the other part? It was, let me look for this really quickly. I forgot to look for specifically. Oh, that's actually funny. This is one of the main studies that I was showing you, like literally in 2019, 2020 timeframe. 2015, a cluster randomized cloth trial. This is so crazy. Do you guys remember me harping on this for the first year? A literal randomized trial of cloth mask studies compared to medical masks. And it showed you, I can't even count how many times I went through this. Poor filtration may result in increased risk infection. We've screamed about this. Anyway, I'm glad I found this real quick because it'll be a good one for those that think we're wrong somehow. Read it for yourself. It's peer reviewed. But I wanted to look for this actually. And I'm going to finish on this segment. We did a main point about kind of what they're highlighting here. Because what was the thing we talked about specifically cloth masks? When this first started, one of the main things we said was that cloth masks are like the worst in the conversation and that they literally increase the risk. But then they lied about it, right? But then literally within the same 24 hours, you had Lena Wen and Gottlieb on Fox and CNN respectively, who came out and said, oh, guess what? Cloth masks don't work. We know that now. Very coordinated. And I came out and said, that's pretty wild. Sage Advisor. Well, this is Sage Advisor. Where was it? Anyway. Oh, that's a good one to include too. Anyway, there's many different, so many of these things we went over. PCR illusion, masks are back for everyone. So the point was, in that one I just pulled up, I'll actually come back to that. The reality was that we know that cloth masks weren't working based on that one I just showed you, in the sense of being not statistically significant in stopping transmission. And more than anything, cloth masks increase the risk of infection and tons of stuff. Is that we said that in 2020 and how important it was. And then went on to break that down and scream about it. Remember how long I was including the mask studies underneath every show I did, even well past COVID? So people knew that. And then they came and just turned direction. Now, this is important to highlight, even now, but realize that we didn't need them doing it to know that, right? TLAV was dying on this hill in the middle of 2020 because the science showing the risks of wearing masks and how they're not statistically significant in stopping transmission was extremely clear long before 2020. And of course, a mix of dogma and stupidity won the day. And I'll include some of them, which this one I actually thought was funny. Who knows if back then people that even watched me, I don't know why I did that so small at the time, thought that I was somehow advocating for masks. And I'll even bet you guys that there is dishonest people out there who used like a picture of this to show people and pretend that I believe in masks or that I changed my mind. And that never happened, not once. From the very beginning of this, I stood on this the entire time, and I still argue that. My point was I used a picture, both of them masks, and the title was "The Mask Science is Clear. If you are doubting the science behind wearing a mask, watch this video." I did it for a reason, to catch the people who thought, oh, good, this will prove that they work. You watch the video, you'll make it's obvious exactly what I'm saying. But that was July 2020. And we break it down. Simple. Exactly what they're saying today. We go over this in 2020. Well, this was a later one, but I grabbed it just now. You have every reason to question everything you're told about variants, vaccines, masks, and PCR tests. This was a kind of an overview. The Great Mask Deception was a big one. That was 2020 as well. This one's 2021. Masks lead to bacterial pneumonia, oral thrush, systemic inflammation, and maybe the cause of long haul COVID, which later became long COVID. I believe that's a huge part of it, as well as the vaccines, obviously, or the injections. The face mask lie exposed, 2020, July. 2020, here's Trump in his mask, because he always did that too. NBC caught faking COVID case. Immunity passports are here, and Trump now says he's all for masks, which he did say. Just seems relevant to bring up again. Now, on to another overlap of the time frame here. I think this is super important because I don't believe it's going to amount to what people want it to be, which is David Morenz, Dr. Fauci's, partner in crime, if you will. That's how it's being framed. Just like John Bolton, I believe this is being set up so it's a pretend accountability. I don't believe Fauci, if not even this person, will go to jail. Here's what Kash Patel said before we get into his other fake plot in regard to the, ISIS thing. Another one he just did. Remember the one before with the FBI shooting? How they tried to make it about some ISIS connection? Guys, that fell on its face. The one person who killed himself is the only person. They did not ultimately get what they claimed about those people, or any number of other lies Kash screamed about in his first 6 months. Just crazy. After an FBI investigation, our DOJ partners, Dr. Fauci's associate, David Morenz, just pleaded guilty to conspiracy and a scheme to avoid FOIA requests. That's what it's about. And you know why he pled guilty? Just like with Bolton, because I'm willing to bet you, my opinion, is that he's going to get a slap on the wrist. And that was probably part of the agreement. My opinion. Kennedy says, thank you, Kash Patel. Think about how dumb that is. Like, is anybody confused about what a clown Kash Patel is? How wildly incompetent he is? His own people say that, but they love how they do this like fake high five and go, we're so smart and we work together. Good job, Kash. You did all the good work. Probably not. He probably had nothing to do with any of that. But it says, for bringing a leading member of this dangerous cabal to justice. Oh, yeah, a leading. Guys, they have gone out of their way to make sure Fauci does not be. They could have put him in jail so long ago, the beginning of the administration. But they waited. They waited until the statute of limitations ran out. They pardoned him. They gave him a commendation. It's so obvious. Johnson's out there with, Ron Johnson's on Benny Johnson's show talking about how we're going to use this and that to bring him down. I hope so. I just think we all can kind of sense that that's all a bunch of BS to keep you led along, leading you by the nose. Accountability is not an option. Is not optional. Seriously? You mean aside from the 47 examples at random choice of number, but just, endless amount of people that they've pardoned? They haven't chosen to go after. Ask Tom Brovovich, who got sent back to Israel after he tried to rape American children. What, is his accountability optional? Apparently so. The American people have a right to know, he says, what their government did. You're damn right. Then why do you keep lying to us about Epstein, about everything? He says, why it did it, and whether public officials deliberately hid it from the truth. What do you mean, why it did it? You are the government, guys. Why you did it. Why our government, like it's a weird, they frame it as if they're some other side of it they're fighting. That's how they keep this going. We will restore transparency at HHS. They did not. Protect our integrity of public records. They did not. They've been hiding and covering and deleting things. And build public trust through action. No one's above the law. Yeah, pause for laughter. So, to highlight this yet again, I did this the last time we talked about it. Fauci advisor David Morenz pleads guilty to avoiding records requests. Good. Put him in jail. But that's really what we're going after? We just went through like a medical genocide, and these people hid and covered up and gaslit, and then literally, like, it's not like they just hid the information. They were part of the things they were hiding. And you're going to charge him with avoiding records requests? Guys, this is insulting. The evidence we have is insane. It's like the Epstein things. It's like Tyler Robinson in the reverse. It's obvious that we see that this is, if they wanted to My God, guys, they could put this the point is, if they put him in prison, they charged him with the real crimes, it would cite back everything that they're involved in. Trump is completely complicit in all of this. As you know, he still takes praise for the shot, guys. August 18th, David Morenz pleaded guilty, charges related to concealing records. Freedom of Information Act, like our government does all the time. The initial indictment, which, by the way, was just an accusation, like we said, but this now amount. Now, I'm willing to bet you, had he not pled guilty, it probably still would have gone nowhere, like most of them. Not because they aren't able to, but because they choose not to. But I think this is to make a point. My gut tells me this is about some kind of organized frame, facade of accountability. The initial indictment and plea documents do not name the two other individuals or the company, though one matches the description of EcoHealth Alliance's then president, Peter Daszak. We all know that's interconnected, and my point, I bet you they never go after that. Somebody very much involved with the creation at a core point of all of this. But nope, probably won't even come up. Because he's important to the establishment who's still doing those things in scientific and gain-of-function research, EPPP, or whatever the new Fange system, whatever the thing they're doing today. Morenz's offense could carry a sentence of up to 5 years, sort of like Bolton's state. It's literally exactly like Bolton's. It could be 5 years. Or it could be a slap on the wrist and some community service, which is what I'm willing to bet you it will be. It says could be up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. He's scheduled to be sentenced on November 12th. Weird how Bolton's not going to be scheduled until like a year from now or next year sometime. Isn't that strange? So this one, all of a sudden, right away, this is set up so it feels like there's accountability. I'm telling you. By my opinion, quote, by pleading guilty today, Dr. Morenz has taken responsibility for what he did and will continue to do so. So, okay, that's from somebody representing him. I'm promising you, this is the same thing the judge said about Bolton. Because he took responsibility, we'll factor that into our ruling. And ultimately, what you're going to get is somebody who took responsibility, who did something that they arguably feel, I guarantee it is pretty damn minor. And we're talking about, every one of them, from Clinton to Trump and his family, have all broken these rules. So that would hold him accountable, good. But it's still a minor thing. And because he said, I did it, I'm sorry, watch. I hope I'm wrong. I truly hope I'm wrong, because he deserves to be in jail like the rest of them do. It's going to be a slap on the wrist. So they pretend somebody was held accountable, and they'll scream out Fauci until you stop caring about it. My unfortunate opinion. As Doom writes the same, this is your Nuremberg 2.0. That's what the claim, right? They're going to military tribunals. This is all you get. Another low-level mook who got thrown under the bus by the person you want most to be punished. And I told you this would happen. But no, I'm the stupid person, I'll fill that in, who remembers how the first trials went. Now, look, I still argue that Fauci is an easy scapegoat, but it would go the same way. Not a real accountability, but some kind of a, you get to stand over there in a corner for 5 minutes, and then, you're upset. As even Tucker told you. He, look at how his life's been ruined, and trust me, it's going to come. No, screw that. They deserve to be in prison for killing people. Making them sad as they take their garbage out is not enough for me. And it shouldn't be for you either, Tucker, even though I'm speaking off a clip, so who knows what he said in the full thing. And that's just to be fair. Now, talking about the deception, the falsehood, the artificial nature of damn near everything, this has just got to be one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. Now, that doesn't mean that it's fake. This lady could literally believe what she's saying, but it speaks for itself. Everything we know about the FBI, it's just basically Kash Patel doing it in a very stupid, sophomoric, dumbed down way since the beginning of this administration. This is not a fake picture. This is literally the woman who signed herself to ISIS, going out in her ISIS burqa and shopping for the things that they gave her money for, drove her to the store for, to go blow something up. And in a store with cameras and like biometrics on the screen. Are you serious? So it's either somebody that's just the intelligence level is something that they always take advantage of. But let's go through this briefly. Here's Todd Blanche going, "We're so great. Thanks to the FBI for its amazing work. According to the complaint, the defendant swore allegiance to ISIS," which who knows if that's even true, guys. Maybe they said, wear this so you can cover your face. Who knows? But look, I want to be very clear. I'm saying that because I'm being facetious, but you need to understand that historically, as we'll go through some examples, that's a almost a likely thing for the FBI to do. The fact that they feel that they can lie and trick and manipulate you into committing a terrorist attack and then say because you followed, half the time they don't even follow through, but because you just went along to some point that you're now charged with a crime, it's straight up crime on their own part, guys. You have to understand, whether it's pre-crime or not, examples of a guy we've talked about in the past who they were kind of driving to take these little toy cars and drive them through a parade. At the end of the point, the guy said, no, I'm not going to do it. And they arrested him right there and charged him with a crime anyway. Okay, well, what if he was just gaslighting you guys and wanted you to think he wanted to do it because he wanted some friends, like you do with people, for example, like this kid, a literally mentally handicapped person. This is from Matt Agarist, Free Thought Project, 2018. Parents catch FBI in plot to force mentally ill son to be a right-wing terrorist. It's not some hyperbolic story. You can read it. It's mainstream media, guys. The parents caught them and literally like lost their minds. Like this kid, basically the story shortened is that this kid wanted friends. He didn't have any friends, and they basically pretended to be people around his community and be like, hey, well, let's be friends. And then slowly worked him into wanting to be part of some kind of plot. And by all the evidence, he never actually even wanted to do it. He just said he did so he could have friends. And ultimately, they used that to pretend he was a terrorist. Now, whether it's about right wing or not, it's what both sides of the paradigm do, guys. And the reality is they do this all the time. And here is The Intercept. Why does the FBI have to manufacture its own plots if terrorism and ISIS are such grave threats? I think it's very important to consider all of this, guys. Very important.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode.
Just had to do something very quickly, somewhat relevant. Okay, so back to the point. Saying that this person had sworn allegiance to ISIS. The question is whether that was even the reality or something that was just manufactured along with all the rest of the stuff they manufactured, and planned to carry out a future deadly attack with explosives in the New York Capitol building while senators were meeting. Thankfully, this scheme was disrupted, potentially saving many lives. This is just the latest example of federal law enforcement stopping a terrorist attack in its tracks. What a ridiculous way to frame this. Now, look, it's possible that there's look, bad people exist that do terrible things. But ask yourself this: when's the last time you have seen something like this that didn't end up being, oh, well, they did it all to get them there? Really ask yourself that. Now, if it was such a prevalent threat, wouldn't they be popping off all over the place? They'd be stopping them everywhere. Wouldn't they be? And I'm not to say there's not some kind of a risk, guys. That's why if in a state of society we have the system we do with the idea of the law, people break the law, they can be held accountable for it. But what they're trying to get us to is a place to where we go, you need to stop it before it happens. That is this whole premise they've been building. Medical pre-crime and pre-crime in general, starting with Bill Barr and Trump's first administration, as Whitney has covered. That's what this comes down to. So we need to ask ourselves whether some of this stuff is designed to justify that direction. Even if it's people that are actually crazy, it doesn't change the fact that they're not committing a crime until they commit a crime. It's as simple as that, guys. And if you think they're crazy, well, then, the idea is not force them into a terrorist attack. It's absolutely mind-blowing that people go along with this. And then you get ridiculous people like Blanche that go, oh, it's so great, and we stopped all the criminals, and don't mention anywhere that you literally funded the entire thing. As Thomas Massey said, the FBI gave her the bomb, the gun, the funds to spend at a Home Depot. I'll show it to you next. The government literally encouraged and enabled this terrorist plot in order to foil it. One day, they'll have to admit this, how the J6, J5 pipe bomb happened as well. And he's right. They literally framed somebody else. And he pointed out to the gate tracking and the person they think, it's the same thing. And you think they're fighting for you? It's like this is not a left-right dynamic. This is about a government gaslighting Americans to control us. So here, oh, and by the way, this is what I think is hilarious, not alarming too. What stood out to me when I first saw this was the fact that Todd Blanche's post had a fact check on it, which now it does not. So think about how wild that is. Then this is Twitter, clearly with an agenda. Elon and Twitter clearly with an agenda to support the team, completely just jump in and delete these things. And this is what it said. And it wasn't just still gathering. This was posted. And it said the criminal complaint states that FBI paid confidential human sources to do it and provided $200 in pre-recorded government funds for the purchases shown in the attached images. Literally gave her the money, the ride, and the direction to do all of it. And guess what? The free speech platform removed what is the truth. Look for yourself. That's what's happening. So here is BBC and literally every other platform, because this is verifiably obvious. FBI arrests woman over alleged plot to bomb New York Capitol building. The FBI arrested the New York woman who was allegedly planning to bomb the state capitol, because guess what? It didn't happen, so we don't know for sure, in Albany to kill lawmakers. Prosecutors allege that Jessica Bowie, 35 years old, had previously pledged allegiance to ISIS. So what's interesting is that's not what she's saying, best I can tell. We'll get more as this develops, what she says in court and so on, if that's even where this ends up. But realize that all we have right now, sort of like with, Tyler admitted this with his, roommate, and is that what happened? We're still basing this off things that you reprinted because you claim you threw the note away, right? So here we are, where you're telling us that she claimed allegiance to ISIS and using that to justify why this is all making sense. And it says she's charged with providing material support or resources to a designated forest terrorist organization. Now, this is a harder sell for some people. But realize the core point in this, and this comes down to the principle of it all. What crime is it by supporting anything? Right? I mean, it's right now. By the way, even Miller was just making a statement about registering people that are Democrats. Like, you need to see how alarming this is. So you could say, ISIS are terrorists and they're dangerous, they're crazy. Okay, maybe you're probably right. But isn't that still just the perception of a group that you support? So what if they start saying, I don't know, Democrats are crazy terrorist monsters? And we have to make sure that if you even support Democrats, well, now you're going to jail because you're a terrorist. Well, in a material sense, like a real sense, not remove the names. What's the difference? Framing. That's all it is. And it gets even more crazy when you step back and realize that ISIS itself is a group that's been funded and organized, armed, supported, and flown around the world by the very people that pretend to fight it. The U.S., Israel, and the rest. If you still have not gotten there, guys, it is easily identifiable. As always, I will include James Corbett's Al-Qaeda documentaries because it's, probably if you watch this truly, you will not walk away from that unless you choose to, pretending like this is not the truth. It's nailed to the wall, guys. It's the obvious reality, and it's been there your whole life. So the point would be that charging her with material support for the group would mean that you have to prove that she actually did something for them, sent them something, as opposed to just dressing in a burqa and using government money to buy things at Home Depot that was maybe going to be used for that purpose. And even then, would that be a support of the group? Are you part of the group? Or are you just ideologically in that direction? Like, this is a dangerous, they create this this like kind of undefined air of just like, well, if you are anywhere in the category, right, you got a black t-shirt on, suddenly it's like, well, you're in that. That's a stretch, right? But my point is that's the kind of thing they do. Now you wear a burqa, suddenly you're a terrorist. Wait a minute, that's not the reality, right? That's what they've been doing for so long. By the way, I just saw some absurd video from Alex Jones hyping the idea of women getting raped by going to the Middle East as he's talking about India because he's that ridiculous. And on top of that, making fun, like laughing about how they're basically being raped. If that's even the real story, one video he shares. It's just these people, like they're, anti-Trump, but they're still avidly fighting for the left-right paradigm. Democrats are the worst. Children, in my opinion. Bowie had repeatedly surveilled the building in advance, they say, and was carrying a fake bomb and a defective gun, which had been supplied to her by the agents. Okay, well, then because it wasn't a real gun or a bomb, then what's the crime here? Oh, she thought they were. How in the hell do you prove that? So now, what if she knew they were fake and was laughing at you guys? Now suddenly, because you lied to her, that now she's on the hook for a crime that wasn't even there because they weren't real in the first place? This deserves to be laughed about. If it wasn't so serious, that is, but it deserves to be ridiculed rather. And people should be calling this out. I'm willing to bet you her lawyer will have a field day if this is even actually allowed to get there, which probably won't, guys. That's the whole point. These things rarely get to that case because they make a deal, because they know what will come out. Spent weeks with agents posing as ISIS members. So now that's why it's material support, because she was supporting ISIS? No, she was supporting feds dressed as ISIS. Like they dress as everything else, by the way. currently as Nazis or whatever else. Not the Democrats, but your government, ladies and gentlemen, right now too. Quote, I want to have it have an effect on the American system, she said. Okay, well, now you start to see where this is being framed. Now you've got people who are politically active who want some different direction. God forbid, talk about anarchy. Well, now you're a terrorist. That's literally why I started that way today, guys, because the truth is what they're trying to create is this fake alignment of people that want to change this country in ways that they don't want as somehow radically dangerous. What they're doing is radically dangerous. The world they're creating is radically dangerous. The things they're putting us in today are radically dangerous. The idea of trying to radically change this back to what it could have been, if not something better, is just being aware of where we are. And look, on top of that, even if you disagree, let's go back to the same point from the start, the square one point I made today. Do we not have a right to think and believe in what we want? Isn't it when you do crimes when you're actually breaking the law? Well, no, they've really clearly nudged this into ideological crime as they scream about other countries who do that. As part of her plot, she planned to use food delivery bags to hide her bomb. And actually, back one more point on that. You know, because what you could highlight is that whether it's ISIS or not, you didn't do anything, right? That's the same point as before. But what I'm saying is, you know, what if you're just arguing, like, I believe in anarchy, which I do, as a genuine possible future step. Not that I'm going, burn it all down because chaos. That's just the dumbest representation. And it's not what that means. But so now my point is that you're saying me believing that makes me a terrorist. When we're in a country that pretends we have ideological freedom. That's like saying believing in democracy, socialism, or fascism are a crime. And also where they're really getting close to, isn't it? Because they find both sides who hate both. Democrats hate fascism, Republicans hate socialism. So you're going to create a world which both of them call for what? Censorship of ideas. Shutting down of ideological freedom. Too late. We've been there for a long time, guys. Agents allegedly also gave Bowie $200 to buy bomb-making material from a local hardware store. They drove her to the Home Depot store. And when she emerged from the store in her burqa, stupidly enough, she allegedly said she hoped these were the right kind of nails. She was arrested on Wednesday and was found carrying knives and a written oath of allegiance to ISIS. Now, does that not just sound like the stupidest thing in and of itself? Why would you be carrying around a written allegiance to ISIS? And pretty sure knives aren't crimes. And pretty sure written statements on paper, whatever they say, are not crimes as well. It's absurd what this is. The only thing that ties this all together, even if it is about ISIS, is the fact that the FBI stepped in and drove her to do it. Would she have done it otherwise? That is the question of the day. And that's why it matters, because whether you know the answer or not, the crime starts when she breaks the law, not when they suggest that she might because they drove her to do it. She is a frequent social media user. Same point. That they're trying to, this is the thing that's going to be used against people like me. Frequent social media user who has used the platforms to espouse anti-American messages. Also why we started with that tweet. According to a charging document. That's literally the charging document by the FBI they put forward on Thursday. Frequent social media user espousing anti-American messages. What was the other part? Anyway, just, the simple idea is that you're framing this. That overlaps with, not honestly, but with anybody that's doing what we do on either side of the paradigm, that they want to call a threat to what they claim is American interest, which really means government Israeli interests. And I mean that in the U.S. government too, but the government, not American civilian average agenda or interests. And that's pretty clear, guys. I mean, conservatives are going through that right now. The document says she has been banned from several platforms. Interesting overlap for violating their terms of service. They're creating a profile here, guys, adding that she had also used social media to praise the September 11th attacks. Okay, there's your difference. If that's even the truth, there's a bit difference here, because somebody like me, and literally me, whether it's not just the same as any anarchist out there, because different opinions, individuals, I believe that it matters to me whether I agree with the agenda or not. Like the idea of what happened in Gaza, the idea that killing people for your political agenda, I do not agree with. And I argue that that is something that is counterintuitive to the idea of what the core movement around this is today, especially libertarianism. Anarchism just becomes more difficult to define because that's the whole point of it. But the idea is that if you're going to say libertarians don't care that you're murdering people for your agenda, that's literally the opposite. You're using political violence to achieve your ends is what all of us are calling out. So what you're highlighting is the fact that she's praising September 11th and then trying to conflate that with media user violation of terms of service, hates America. And it's a manipulative connection, because I'm sure there are Americans that praise that. And you know what, guys? It's their right to do. They're right. They can praise anything they want. They can say, guess what? People that currently praise the Israeli genocide, same thing. People that go look back and say the Bosnia genocide was good for us all. I go, you're disgusting. But they have a right to say it, don't they? Why would that be a crime? Because you connect the dots and argue it's a profile. And here we go. And even if you're right, it's the same point. And we need to stand on this line. There's no crime until she breaks the law. And look, what they're going to say is, oh, you want to let her blow things up? That's not what I said. There's no evidence that was going to happen without your involvement. And guess what? You guys do it all the time, all around the world. Not saying that makes it okay, but it's hypocritical for you to say that. And secondarily, people do these things around the world in this country, whether or not they're dressed as ISIS. It's danger is always there. Do your best to stop it with our rights being the primary guide. And yes, that allows some danger. That's life, guys. Rights are the final point. If it bumps up against that, your answer is don't. Even like the same thing with the Donald Trump immigration point. They literally convinced people that were screaming about the Constitution that it's important to break the Constitution to save the Constitution. Now, maybe that's just a lack of intelligence or people that believed enough in Trump, but the point was they tricked you, guys. Please make sure you watch this. False flags, the secret history of Al-Qaeda. Oh, and then interestingly enough, I meant to do this while this was up. So here is the picture of this person in a burqa, right? Just for, clear, I guess, more perspective. This weird picture of her in a burqa. And then went outside taking a picture of them, I guess, or however that worked. Taking photos during the trip to the Capitol building. They're literally looking right at them. Like, I don't even believe that makes sense. Anyway, the point is that this, if you remember, is Tommy Robinson, who posted this pretending it was about Muslims. And I want to highlight this for a reason. Tommy, who is just ridiculous, posted this saying, this has no place in the 21st century. And it shows a woman with burqa with her children in burqas as well. Right? So what he's saying is Muslims who do this have no place in today, right? Only problem was it was a Jewish family, as we've covered many times. And it's amazing how people still just don't want to absorb this. And it's the same as pretending that it's wrong for people to in Iran and the idea of the hijab and the idea or specifically, anyway, many different points you could make. And the point being that there's elements of that are forced, and it's largely not really enforced in many places in the country. And women can dress largely in many ways like Americans do. It's easy to prove, by the way, but there is some enforcement on it. And many of them wear it simply because they see it as a challenge to Western encroachment on their lives. But then you take a glance over and look at the Orthodox Jews in Israel, how they force women to wear head coverings. And it's just not talked about. It's just it's a deliberate manipulation and misrepresentation. So in this case, as this Jewish family here's the article itself from the Jewish platform, Jewish independence nonprofit called Forward. Oh my God. Guys, this is so crazy. This is not an accident. Hold on, now I can't get it to refresh. There we go. Look at this. They removed the image. This is so crazy. Here's the original head right here. That's the original post. And it says, introducing the Frumqua, Jewish women under the burqa. Because it's the same point. They cover their heads in whatever it is, homage to God or, whatever the terminology is. And the same point applies in extreme orthodoxy to people in Judaism. And I think it's insane that this platform removed the image because of what it shows. Because it's from 2015. This is happening all over the internet, guys. It's so easy to see that there are people trying to cover and hide directions, and it all connects to the same larger point, in my opinion. But what I said, and here's the actual article, which, it said, read that too so you can see it. Nope, this isn't a Dementor or a modern art installation. This isn't even, as you more likely expect, a Muslim woman wearing a burqa. Nope. It says, jump kind of the chase. Where is it? Right here. A Jewish woman and her two daughters. A dark black cloth covering them head to toe. Well, there you go. Ask yourself why they removed the image, guys. I still find that insane. So Tommy Robinson is the one sharing this, pretending or being stupid enough not to realize that it wasn't Muslims. But it's okay. He's allowed to say that, because if he came out here and said, these Jewish people have no place 21st century, he would have been banned the moment he posted it. Not this one, though. Well, I said, will you still call this out as having no place in the 21st century once you realize it's actually a picture of a Jewish woman in Israel? Probably not. So now think about that. Why is it important that she's in a burqa if that's not unique to ISIS? Even in reality being is that burqas are worn by people all over the world that aren't ISIS. It's just sad how blatantly obvious these kind of agendas are. You took advantage of a person who doesn't understand. You took advantage of somebody who is either mentally unwell or been propagandized by the wrong thing. You used this person, and then it didn't even happen, and you still tried to charge her. This is so common. It makes me sick. As I said, parents catch FBI in a plot to force their mentally ill son to be a terrorist. Intercept has done like 4 articles about this over the years. This is Glenn from 2015. Why does the FBI have to manufacture its own plots if it's such a great threat? It's a good question. It's a good article. Read it. Now, talking about the censorship, which clearly plays a factor on this exact point, is that people like us who are talking about this, and more specifically in the context of the war, people that are talking about military things, that the supposed free speech absolutists in our government want censored. And this is Occupy Democrats even saying Pete Hegseth forces the editor of military newspaper Stars and Stripes to resign and replaces him with a loyal minion for breaking the story of sailors throwing themselves off the USS Abraham Lincoln. Now, I haven't talked about this in a minute. When I first talked about this like a week ago or more, I hadn't been able to confirm whether that actually happened. I'm going to point this out to you today. It very much did happen. And that they're trying to pretend like they lied about it, even though it was real, which means they don't care about these people. And now that it's been proven, they call it a mental health issue and the guy was problematic. Okay, it's still the same point. I have the father telling you that they are worried about them on the ship. As I understand it, I guess they're not bringing it back, even though he just told you that it needs to go longer, as his usual bluster. The Trump can't just admit it was wrong and go, screw you, I'm right, it's going to go longer, and then takes it back. Has to have that moment of I'm strong, which shows you that he's weak. That's what it always shows you when somebody pounds their chest and ultimately caves. The publisher of Stars and Stripes is walking away after more than 30 years. As at the story military newspaper at Pete Hegseth's Pentagon moves to exert more control over a publication generations of American service members have trusted for independent news. Well, take or leave that part if you want. Max led, it has done great work over the years, but same thing. I've seen things on there that I don't believe, I think are, at certain moments, it leads in the direction, it's pro-status, pro-military. Max Lederner, who has served as publisher for nearly 2 decades, announced his retirement after the Pentagon installed an active duty Navy public affairs officer as his deputy without even consulting him. He made clear this was no ordinary retirement. He says, quote, "It has become clear that my philosophy of leadership and my understanding of the value and mission of Stars and Stripes differ in fundamental ways from the direction and the leadership of the Department of Defense has for the organization. That direction has been increasingly obvious since Hegseth took over the Pentagon. His Defense Department has derided Stars and Stripes as woke, announced plans to overhaul the publication, and fired its independent ombudsman, who is now suing the Pentagon and alleges she was retaliated against for criticizing its attempts to control the paper's editorial content. Which I argue this proves, by the way. You'll see it as we go through it. Now active duty Captain William Urban has been placed directly in the newspaper's senior leadership, which members of the Stars and Stripes advisory board says threatens the separation that has allowed the government-funded newspaper to report independently. But we know that's never been the full picture because they pressure, they lean. But what they're saying is it used to be a paper that was, people that were veterans, but funded by the government, but not bound by what they want. Well, now they moved him out of the way and put an active duty person at the head, who's now literally under the control of the executive branch. I mean, it's just so hard. It's insultingly obvious. And they want to pretend they believe in free speech and everything they scream about, guys. That's just insulting. And they'll scream about Iran and North Korea and whoever else doing the exact same thing. How does someone with zero experience in a global news organization walk into a senior level role at Stars and Stripes? Asked the board. We should all worry about the future of this platform. 3 Democratic senators are worried enough that they've demanded Hegseth explain his role. Now, as usual, I argue they probably wouldn't care if it was something that benefited them or they were the ones in power. It's about using it to look like they're adversarial and calling out the power. My opinion, say I'm jaded, I probably am, but look, historically, I'm right, and I bet you that's how it pans out. It says, and here's why this matters right now. Stars and Stripes has continued doing exactly the kind of journalism an independent military newspaper is supposed to do. The exact opposite, and you damn well know it, than what Trump and Hegseth want. They want somebody who's going to recite that we're winning and everything's great and Trump is so strong and his hair looks great that day. Like, it's literally, I'm joking, but kind of not. Like, they're like, do whatever we say, make us look great. And it's, guys, it's like kindergarten level obvious. The way that they attack papers who literally break stories like the Lincoln story that turn out to be right. Everybody sees that. It has reported critically on the mental health crisis and risk of self-harm of people on the Lincoln, even as Hegseth attacked people reporting on it and said they were fake news. Well, he's lied. We know that. We can prove it. It's real. I mean, like you didn't know that on this platform, but realize all the things they're lying about today and willing to lie while they know these are the people they say, the military that they claim they're fighting for, and they didn't even care that they were suffering and lied about it. I mean, what you could have said is, well, yeah, it's tough. They're suffering, but we're at war. You know how many Republicans would have died on that hill? But they're bad at this. And so they go, fake news, Democrats, woke, you're a liar. And they've failed because that's how weak that is. Hegseth has shown little interest in leading the Pentagon through the institutional restraints, professional expertise, and hard-won consensus that traditionally govern an organization of nearly 3 million people. He wants to impose his will on it, and an independent newspaper capable of telling those people things their bosses don't want them to hear plainly doesn't fit that model. So just quickly, here's the AP report on it. After this, so that was on the 20th, this is on the 21st. So the day later, it gets even worse. Stars and Stripes editor says he has been fired for insubordination after doing an interview. Now it says the Pentagon on Friday fired the editor-in-chief of Stars and Stripes as well as its publisher and a reporter. So that's in addition to him from the, apparently they're clearing house of anybody that won't do what they're told. Hashtag journalism. And as it says, as well as their publisher and a reporter, the editor said, he said he was dismissed for insubordination after an interview he gave that objected, get this, to censorship by the military. So he goes on an interview and says, well, we can't allow them to censor us for the military because, journalism, and they fire you for insubordination. Is anybody confused? I mean, there's no way you look around this. Eric Slavin, editor-in-chief of the military newspaper that is partly funded by the Pentagon, but has a long legacy of editorial independence, so we're told, told the Associated Press that he and the others had received notices of separation. Slavin said he was being fired for, quote, stating in a CBS interview that hypothetical censorship, not even real, but just saying in the future, hypothetically, should that happen, hypothetical censorship for news for service members would constitute a red line for him. Right? So they said, oh, well, get him out of here then. So a red line for him is allowing them to censor, so get him out of the way. It's very, very clear that Stars and Stripes must remain editorial independent. And they said, no way, we can't allow independence and send free speech. That's crazy. Hashtag free speech, Elon Musk. Now, Lerner made his announcement a few weeks after the Pentagon installed a new deputy publisher, an active duty service member, which is important. So they put him in underneath him and then coordinated getting him out of the way and then bumped this guy up. And that's the only reason they did that. Guy had no experience there. He's an active duty person. He was put underneath him. So when he got kicked out of the way, he bumped up to the position. That's what I think anyway. Hegseth's Pentagon moves to exert an editorial control and eliminate what it asserts are woke distractions. In April, Pentagon fired Jacqueline Smith, ombudsman for the newspaper, whose job had been to safeguard editorial independence. So it's clear the timeline as they were getting out of this. Get rid of the woman who's literally her job is to safeguard what we're attacking, and then force them to do it. If they don't, we'll get new people. That is the state of where we are, where we've been for a long time, but where it's just, I guess, either obvious to a certain degree or worse than ever. So the Cradle highlighted this video. What I find really weird, by the way, apparently this was posted on Instagram. That's what everyone argues. This guy, Andrew Brown, as far as I can tell, was the very first person to talk about this thing, which I think is super important, guys, that instead of even just like the Cradle link or whatever else, like finding the original, where was the first person who made this argument? Don't they deserve credit? And I believe that's Andrew Brown. But what I find so strange is that I literally am unable to find the original post on his Instagram account or wherever it was. I looked for a while too. Nonetheless, the Cradle, good for them for posting it and giving him some reach, put this out here. He says 6 people have tried to jump off the USS Lincoln. Now, when this first came out, that was the point. Hegseth called it fake news. They're a bunch of woke Democrats. Well, he's right. Proven to be right. Next, I'll play a clip of a father talking about his son on the ship, dealing with all the same stuff. You know, the pictures of food, like these guys just lied through their teeth at you. Same with the reflecting pool. Same with everything about Iran. You know, same with everything.
As there's a mental health crisis happening aboard the USS Lincoln in the Middle East that no one is talking about, and mainly because the Navy's pretty much quashing it. You will read online about food shortages, supply shortages, poor morale among crew members. That's because they've been at sea continuously for 250 days. They've been deployed a total of 271 days, 250 without a port of call. That's unheard of. Normally, they would go to port every 3 to 6 weeks. They have not been to port.
And their families are largely where, like that's, for them, they're alarmed, right? Like this has been months. They haven't seen him when they usually see him pretty, intermittently. That's one of the reasons this started to come out, because the families were speaking out, and it's hard to hide.
38 weeks. Keep in mind, there are 52 weeks in a year, and 50 without a port of call. That's unheard of. Normally, they would go to port every 3 to 6 weeks. They have not been to port in 38 weeks. Keep in mind, there are 52 weeks in a year. And yes, the showers are moldy. They're eating basically like a gruel kind of slop at this point. There's no deodorant. There's no toothpaste. My nephew has a friend on board there, and I was basically hearing updates last week when I was in the States in real time. They're not talking about the mental health crisis. 6 people have tried to jump off that ship. The most recent was last Monday. You know, when you have not touched land in 38 weeks, in over 200 days, things start to happen to you mentally. You know, combine that with exhaustion, and deadly mistakes start to happen. So, this is how the Department of War, this is how Donald Trump treats our servicemen and women, whose lives are already being put in harm's way for a bullshit war of aggression that was supposed to be over in a matter of weeks. We are further putting their lives at risk out of sheer ineptitude and neglect. It defies logic, it defies reason, and it defies basic fucking humanity.
Sorry for the curse. I forgot that was at the end. But I agree with him, right? I mean, it's absolutely crazy to me that this is something that it just speaks, it speaks for itself. What they're doing in all of this, showing you that they don't care about any of these people, that they're willing to abuse them. Like the same point I just made a second ago. It wouldn't have been difficult for you to sell this as something that was just, I mean, it would have been unpopular to say that it's just, it is what it is. But, we're in the middle of a war. Like, it's important for the cause. Like, this is something that will get a lot of status. Like, okay, we get it. And they have done some degree of that, but they just lie because they're weak. Hegseth is so clearly out of his depth. He just lies because he's doing what he's been told about everything. Anything goes wrong, blame the Democrats. That's what they did. And so good on Andrew Brown for calling this out way before people were talking about it. He got shouted down by the fake, the actual fake news, all of our government. And here is a father talking about how this is happening. And it's talking to, I forget what, a mainstream, I think CNN, and simply asks about people jumping off and so on. And in case you haven't seen, this isn't real. That was very real. Like in regard to specific examples of people that put a life vest on, jumped off, and they called it like a mental health thing. But apparently it's far more than that. And far more people are struggling. And it's not just about the fact that they're being kept out, but it shows you they're trying to hide the reality of what's going on, guys, at the expense of the people that they claim they're fighting for.
I want them to come home. And all of us as parents have some questions about the length of time that it's taken and the distribution of military assets.
I'm wondering, a U.S. official tells me that last month a sailor on the USS Abraham Lincoln went overboard. Actually, it was earlier this month. And that sailor was wearing a life vest. It was seen as a mental health incident, kind of a cry for help. I wonder what your reaction is as a father when you heard that, and also these attempted man overboard events that has been reported by the Military Times.
Well, it's obviously terrifying. And because they're in a combat zone, communication is not regular. So you always wonder, every one of those sailors, and I didn't realize this, they kind of become like your own child. You think of them as a group, they survive as a group, and they work as a group, and you're concerned about every one of them, and we care about them. And so that is grieving to hear that people were pushed to that limit mentally. And I think it makes us want to take a hard look at how this generation of sailors is being prepared. As time goes on, generations change, and perhaps we need to reanalyze how we're training or preparing them, or the timeline for deploying them.
Has your child expressed any feelings of mental health strain? And do you know if your child feels that there are adequate resources to address that? I'm wondering if you could give any more of an insight into that.
I've had very positive communications, but I do know the boredom, the heat that's been out there, and I can't imagine the humidity. It has taken its toll. Mm-hmm. I question about the supplies at the beginning, and we're hearing these reports, and this is the first time we're ever hearing these reports. And then it's hard to know what's true, what's exaggerated, and it's very worrisome, I will say, on the parents' end, because you hear these things even if you know they're not true or they might be grossly exaggerated. It is an extra amount of stress when your loved ones are at sea and you worry about them, because yes, they're in a combat zone. But as far as my particular child, rations got a little rough for a while, and I know conditions can be a little rough. I've never been on a carrier, and they have, so I can't speak to that, but I got to say they're keeping their chin up on this one.
And he, clearly supports the agenda, it seems. Either way, the point is, that they're struggling. Rations, people jumping off the ship. That's the only point to make. Not that it's necessarily as bad as what some may make it out to be. The point was that those were the only things they were arguing. The guy who was, Andrew, breaking it down was making the case of the things that we already knew about, and he got called a liar. I think that's pretty disgusting. What they're willing to do and what they actually care about. I mean, and let's realize what this is really about. This is not about Americans. I think most people have come to terms with that. I mean, really, just to end, I'm going to plan on getting into the rest of this tomorrow, but really the end with the point of pointing out Israel, actually. But just really quickly, what we're going to talk about is the idea of more censorship. It builds to what we were talking about today, and the idea of what's building around the border. The biometric wall that they're building everywhere for you, not for immigrants, for you to keep, it is the control grid that we've been talking about, and it's only building out. This is a military contractor doing this domestically on the border, but also domestically. And it's so clear what this amounts to. And we're going to get into that in the future show, talking about where it goes. Flock cameras and what that amounts to. Now suddenly showing up as traffic cones. No joke. Literally hiding them as traffic cones. That's where this goes. Women being arrested for 7 months. I actually recently talked about this because they identified the wrong car. Welcome to the future of where this goes, right? But all the towns where they put multiple, hundreds of cameras, and they literally verifiably have not only not improved the crime rate, in many cases it's gotten worse. You just can't. We told you this right in the beginning. Iran dismissing that there's any back channel, calling them lies. Just yet again, the same stupid story as Trump pretends he's in control and Iran says you're a liar. We don't need that. And, it's pretty obvious to see where this is. Trump on, this was on the 17th. Iran wants to make a deal. And then literally the next day says there's no talks. Does he not realize that he just said there was a deal? I mean, who knows? It's just embarrassing. Vance saying that they, won't be charging previously, which we know is actually happening, but Trump ultimately threatening Oman, which I think is part of that, saying threatens to bomb Oman if it gets in the way of ending what he's saying is, Oman, don't work with Iran to give them control of the strait, or they will bomb you. Based on what? What legal grounds? Oh, that's right. They bomb whoever they want, like Iran, without any legal justification, and nobody does anything about it. But you still confused about who the problem is here? He'll bomb anybody that gets in the way. But I mean, come on. That's what criminals do. Iran's president saying that they should end while they hold power, which I think is more about an effort to try to show the world like we want to resolve this and we're in control, but we want to wrap this up. So, but who knows how that goes? The idea of Trump saying Iran's economy is about to collapse, but you even have central bank advisors saying that's not true. We can see that that's not the reality. Like, I think we all know this. Trump saying he'll launch the most crushing economic operation ever in Iran. And then Iran's officials saying U.S. focus on their economic warfare simply shows they've failed militarily. Check, chess here. And they're, Trump's playing checkers is the whole joke. It's obvious that they're behind and they're flailing. Every day you could ask, is there something I'm missing? Day one, we were asking that. Like, is this, Iran could be lying. Iran could be completely floundering, and this is them putting on a brave face. But at some point, you have to acknowledge that this is not what Trump is claiming. And it's just obvious that they have the upper hand here. Marjorie Taylor Greene literally suggesting that they're talking about using nukes in their conversations. Who knows if she's part of some scam? I don't know. Her saying that seems relevant to me. Trump simply saying, I'll just read what he said, by the way. We had no choice. I would have done it 100 times over. We can't have a nuclear weapon. As Mr. Sausage frames it as, I'm owned by Israel. The American people don't want this war, but F them. I work for Israel. That's pretty much what he says in this, if you read between the lines. Meanwhile, Israel is literally holding a U.S. citizen hostage, not the one that was let go before, but another one named Sama Safi. She's currently being held for months as a U.S. citizen. Your government doesn't care. Normal stuff from the Israeli government, best ally in the world. You've got Netanyahu publicly stating that they are, where was it right here? Netanyahu this is something he said before, tells the world that he will single-handedly change the entire face of the Middle East, through the U.S. government, clearly, and that Israel will attack any country at any time. I've told you this, guys. They don't hide this when they're speaking in Hebrew in Israeli media. They say, we will do whatever. There's no law that will bind us. We're not legislating, but international law does not slow us down. They say these things constantly. As Patrick says, Israel's out of control. They are by far the biggest threat to peace in the region, in the world, guys. It's not even debatable. Along with the United States, Francisco Albanese, the most moral army strikes again. And again and again in the West Bank, soldiers and settlers cut water pipes while Kursa's siege continues. In the Gaza, the pulverization continues, and so the massacres. Since the ceasefire, Israel's killed 1,200 people plus, including over 300 children. That's where we are. But, another normal day for the U.S. empire. Worth knowing what they're actually doing in the world today. But we'll leave it there for the day, guys. Important to break all this stuff down and see where it goes and to think about alternatives, right? Think outside the box. Don't follow these paths they're laying out. Think about take your own trail. Find something new. Think of a different path forward because, my God, we need it today. Leave it there for the day. Thank you for tuning in today. I love you all. Appreciate your support. If you want to continue supporting this platform, there's plenty of ways to do it. We need your help. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Number 8, we will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately. For years, Congress has required biometric entry-exit visa tracking systems, but it has never been completed. The politicians are all talk, no action, never happens, never happens. Hillary Clinton, all talk. Unfortunately, when there is action, it's always the wrong decision. Do you ever notice? In my administration, we will ensure that this system is in place. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system.